What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to an impromptu late night logical, plausible, probable. Decided to do a open mic stream after listening a little bit to the madness that was going on over on Speed of Pudding's channel, as well as the brief observation I had earlier today with another stream on on Pudding's channel, and I honestly just don't know how this level of stupidity is able to continue to perpetuate if evolution is true. I mean, it really is. It's reaching levels of just full scale madness. I don't know how to deal with it, but one of the things that I got a great deal of entertainment about earlier that has partially led to this is the one and only Immutable Destiny, who the man has serious issues. On Pudding's channel, he was talking about they had this whole stream about the is the cell a machine, and they went off this little tangent about how it's not. And I'm just like, am I actually hearing the words coming out of this person's mouth right now, claiming that it's not, when the description he's giving literally fulfills the type of things he was pointing out to the extreme. This level of stupidity was to such an extreme that I'm actually going to do a video on this exact topic and use that little blurb as a inspiration, because I'm like, man, if Evos are this ignorant about basic mechanics in manufacturing and production, I don't know how they put their pants on in the morning and tie their shoes if they're actually this ignorant or this consciously stupid in terms of framing of their arguments. I mean, a machine or mechanical device is a mechanical structure that uses power to apply forces and control movement to perform an intended action. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing. And then for him to go on about this part, ladies and gentlemen, when I come up with this video, you're going to want to watch it because it's going to be very entertaining. The discussion about how unless the outcome is 100% perfect all the time, then it's not a machine. And I'm just like, there is literally no manufacturing process, machine on this planet that operates 100% efficiently every time, never has error. If that were the case, we wouldn't need quality control protocols and structures and error correction. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. But anyway, Danny, welcome to the stream, my friend. You were just dealing with the madness over there. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How about you, sir?
I'm exhausted. It's been a long day, but
why? Work and stuff?
Yeah, work, and I'm in the process of moving, so I've had a lot of stuff going on, but all good. I was actually driving home and listening to the madness.
Yeah, there's a lot to listen to.
I was getting so much. I wasn't gonna do. I had no intention to do a stream, and then I'm like listening to that garbage, and it's like, what are these people arguing over? And here, okay, so real question for you on this. So I know you have obviously been around and listened to more than a few of the is it code, is it not code arguments, right? I felt like I was hearing well, this what I'm about to say also applies to like objective versus subjective morality, right? I'm like, so it's like with laws, they're objectively subjective. And then morals, it's no, they're 100% subjective. No objective. And then it's not a code, but it looks like a code. And I'm like, I feel like when they're the back and forth you were having with them about laws and such, I felt like I was listening to a round robin jumping around of like all three of those positions that I just was talking about. being applied to the point you were making about laws and such. You follow that where I'm going with that?
Well, what confuses me is that, like, first of all, I think I reject that they're laws in the strict sense of biology. I don't think that makes any sense. Because if we were to, like, let's say there's some kind of law, right, or principle that they produce, right? Seems like we could uh, observe something that seems to go against the law, but then none of biology would change, right? So, like, if, like, I gave the example of a fruit fly being produced totally naturalistically, but not from another life form. Okay, that what is that going to? How are the biologists going to change their methodology and their theories? They're not, right? So, and I think that the idea was that hypothetical seemed to go against, certain kinds of a principle that Erica was trying to put forth. But the point is, the overall point I was making is that there are no laws of biology. There are no principles of biology. At best, there's something called ceteris paribus laws, which is like, given XYZ ABC conditions, we would expect this, right? But then that just means that we could have, that means that if something were to operate outside of it, that we could see something different, right? And I don't know where that puts. I don't know the exact implications of that on science as a whole. But it's certainly something to think about in terms of, okay, well, biology is not built on these kind of exceptionalist laws like maybe physics is. So where does that put biology, and how? And I don't know the answer to that question. I have to think about it a bit more. But anyways.
Well, see, I would wager. I follow what you're saying. I don't disagree with what your point you're making. I would say that biology actually provides a ongoing plethora of exceptions, not necessarily from like breaking of laws, right? But of dramatically altering what the normal standard outcome would be.
Yeah, and that's fine. And then, but the point is,
it destroys the term. There's so many things, enzymes, just an example, like they completely annihilate the normal deterministic chemistry, right? Like, oh, this is not even remotely close to what would actually happen unless this is in place. Then you can accelerate a reaction by 5 million times, right? This would take 1,000,000 years to do, or if you have this, you can do it in like 0.3 of a second, kind of thing, right? The totally different dynamic. But your general premise, I agree with you completely. It makes total sense to me.
Well, the weird thing is that I heard
it did not seem to be computing with them. They were like, I felt like they were going into like a full scale, like, we must attack. I don't know. It was weird. Like they couldn't seem to comprehend the big picture.
Well, I think that it's a big bullet to bite to say that like biology is not built on natural laws, right? Because then basically it's something like as bad as something as like sociology or psychology. It becomes like a soft science, right? And they don't want that, right? It doesn't become like they want to say that biology is just as much science as like physics or something. And there might be a way to like get there. I'm not so sure how though. I have to think about it. But the point is that if you adopt some kind of principle in biology, and with exceptions, number one, I don't see why you would call it a principle. You could talk about in terms of like what's very probable. And if you call it a principle or a law, it just seems like it's just a kind of practical consideration. Like practically speaking, we given this, whatever follows from that, and that's not that problematic. It's just not tracking any kind of truth about the way things are. It just becomes like a practical assumption or something. But I don't know. There's a lot to think about. I think that I'm leaning towards some kind of Humean skepticism, which is like maybe there's just these all of laws all the way down to physics is just some kind of like practical thing that humans aren't used to like do science, develop technology and, you know, go about our lives. And I'm not so sure if I accept something like that, but I'm kind of pushed to that. I'm gonna have to think about it more.
Interesting. All right, so here's a very important follow-up question. So, did you get a new custom avatar for yourself?
Yeah, one of my friends drew it for me, or painted it.
Nice, very nice. So you get to bring your personifying yourself online, eh?
Yeah, I hope this is disarming, and that way I can go in for a kill. You know, it's like it's evolution, right? It's, you know, I'm kind of camouflage. No, not camouflaging, but posing, mimicking an innocent boy. Right, and then
So, ladies and gentlemen, per the late night admission of Danny, his objective is to disarm, to have people lower their shields, to open themselves up for intellectual annihilation as they attempt to spew dumbassery from a philosophical sense.
Did you ever watch that video between me, Pine Creek, and I?
I watched part of it. I did.
Oh my gosh, that guy's pretty horrible.
Honestly, I have a very hard time taking Pine Creek in like very large doses. He really kind of annoys me, to be honest.
Did you understand the objection I was given? It's actually kind of interesting. I don't know if interesting like argument against naturalism. Did you get that far? I'm not so sure.
I believe so. Shoot me the link again. We'll play it real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean Pine Creek. I have such a hard time listening to him. It's like he really strikes me. You know all the jokes that are made about the like the televangelist.
Yeah,
I feel like he is the televangelist who became the buy here, pay here used car salesman.
I put it in the private chat. No, he's pretty horrible. Yeah, he's pretty. I can't stand. That was my first interaction with him, and then I asked some of my friends about him, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's just like a horrible interlocutor," and he's like really poor reasoner. I put it in the private chat, but
yeah, I got it.
You don't know what I mean by a
I don't think mental states exist. I think Danny just is self-deluded.
Do you believe that?
I've been programmed to believe that.
Okay, so you do believe that, but that's self-defeating. You just contradicted yourself.
No, I didn't.
You said there are no mental facts. Wait, pause it there. Pause it there. Do you hear what he said? He said he didn't think that there were mental facts. Now, keep in mind that beliefs are mental facts. And then I asked him if he believed that, and he said he was programmed to believe that. But that presupposes a mental fact, which is the very thing that he's denying. Yeah, so he contradicted himself.
Yeah, the pre-programmed to think that comment really stuck out to me. I'm like, so are you relying on evolution for the pre-programming, a prior existing entity that programmed it? Like, I'm pretty sure you deny that anything's programmed. So which one is it, man? Like, let's argue subjective, objective opinion.
Used to describe things.
Then I don't know what you mean by it.
I don't know what you mean by it.
A mental fact? You don't know what I mean by a mental fact?
Yeah, what's a mental fact?
Mental fact, there are two kinds of mental facts, right? Generally speaking. Intentional states and qualitative states. Intentional states, the classical understanding is that they're about...
No, intentional states don't exist.
Do you know what I mean by intentional state?
Go ahead.
Wait, you said they don't exist. So what did you mean? It seems like you're being dishonest.
No.
That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. What is it?
Doesn't even know what it is. Just these people.
Jamie, welcome to the stream, man. I think it's been a while. You finally made it in.
Hey, man. Good to see you.
You too, man. You been having a good night?
I've been in my robe all day.
You're having a very productive weekend so far, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, I think you're being dishonest. I think you believe in mental states and intentional states, but you're lying.
I don't understand.
I think you're just self-deluded.
How would you know whether I'm lying if you don't even know what I'm saying?
Well, because you're just spitting out your program nature.
Do you think lying is intentional?
What's an intentional state?
What's an intentional state? Some kind of state that's of or about something else.
Yeah, and that's just been programmed into you.
Are you saying that there's a cause-effect relationship between an intentional state and some other fact?
I'm saying it's completely naturalistic.
I don't know what you mean by programmed, other than what you just said. You're saying that there's a causal interaction between the natural and the physical?
They're the same thing.
I meant the natural state and the intentional state?
The same thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that they can interact.
I'm saying the same thing.
You're saying the same thing.
Okay, so okay, yeah, let's keep going. That's just wow.
Yeah.
Right. But you're disputing the existence of intentional states, right?
Intentional states, if you define it as naturalistic, yeah, then it exists. If you define it as immaterial, then it doesn't.
Wait, so you have a concept, you distinguish something natural and non-natural, right?
No. There's only natural exists.
So a natural thing is just a thing.
Yeah.
So a natural thing is uninformative.
I don't know what you mean by uninformative, but if you mean it in a naturalistic sense, then you're right.
So basically, he is a reductionist in the extreme.
Well, he's saying this. This is the problem I'm going to highlight. Let me explain it to everyone. If you say that all things are natural, right? That means, or a thing is just a natural entity, right? Then what you've done when you say that something is natural is you're saying that thing is a thing, right? So a natural thing is just saying something like that's a thing, right? Because, like, for instance, you and I, we want to distinguish natural and non-natural. There are things that are natural and there are things that are non-natural. But if you're saying that everything is natural, then if that means that every kind of entity is a natural entity, right? Which means that it's an entity or a thing. It doesn't add any. You dissolve the meaning. Does that make any sense? Like, so to repeat it once more, if everything is natural, then to say that there is a natural thing is just to say that's a thing.
Well, I think that point you're making applies to the supposed counter to the watchmaker analogy too, of like, oh, well, the whole universe is watches, therefore you can't know which one is the designed watch. Like that same kind of premise extrapolates out to, from what you just said. I think something like that. Yeah, that supposed logic applies to that type of supposed debunking of like watchmaker analogy, for example.
There's a moral philosophy, a moral theory that has the same issue. It's called egoism or psychological egoism, and they define all actions as selfish, right? So that means that if all actions are selfish, then to say there's some selfish action, it's just to say there's an action, right? Because presumably you want to say there are some actions that are selfish and some that are altruistic. But if you're saying there's no such thing as altruistic actions, then all actions are selfish. You're just saying all actions are actions.
Yeah,
right?
The Cosmic Skeptic, Alex O'Connor, has a painful video where I don't think he uses the term you used, but he described everything as wants, and that we're ultimately subject to wants. And basically, even if you do something that isn't what you want on the surface, it is actually what you wanted, even if you did something for somebody else. And it's like, okay, let's go down that freaking black hole. Across the event horizon on that one of any kind of rationality. And then what really got me about that and one of those types of positions, it's like, so on one side you argue for moral accountability, and like in Cosmic Skeptic's standpoint, he's a freaking vegan and vegan defender activist, whatever, right? Well, on the other side, from his philosophy, he talks about like everything being purely deterministic and you have no control over it. So anyway, enough of that.
Is this a moral conversation or an origins conversation?
This one, he's a naturalist, and I'm not. And I try to give him an argument against naturalism, and he just blunders throughout the whole thing. We should continue.
It seems to me that the naturalism has
say something natural. Because
Are you adding anything to the data when you say something is not natural?
I distinguish them, so yes. You don't, so this is a problem for you.
I distinguish them. I don't distinguish them, so it's meaningful. Yes.
The fact that I distinguish them, there's a meaningful difference between
The fact that I
natural
don't distinguish them means it has meaning.
No, because what you just said is everything is a natural thing, right?
Right.
So that means that if it's natural, it's just a thing, right?
Right.
Okay, so when you say there's a natural thing, you're saying there's a thing.
Yeah. Thing. Yeah.
Okay, do you think the extra thing to the word thing adds any extra information?
No, I'm saying you don't need to add anything.
You don't need, look, I'm just saying that when I say that a closed door is closed, that's uninformative because it's a repetition of what's in the subject, right? In the same way that if I said this is a cup, or that's a thing, I don't need the extra word to describe what I'm referring to.
Right. You do not need the extra immaterial to describe what we're.
Wait, you need to respond to what I said.
I am.
No, you did not. You switched on my delineation between immaterial and immaterial.
You're saying that I'm not adding anything useful, and I'm saying you're not adding anything.
You understand the argument for why I said that?
Yeah, you think it's adding something to it, and I disagree. I
You
think.
really don't. I can repeat it if you want. Right? Here's the thing. If you define everything as a natural thing, right? Okay, that means that, or rather, I should say, anything that is natural is just a thing. Then to say a natural thing is to repeat yourself and say that it's a thing.
Yeah, thing.
Okay, but you admit that that's redundant.
Yes.
So the word natural, it doesn't add anything when you predicate it of an object.
Right, and just like supernatural or immaterial doesn't add anything.
No, you think that's incoherent, right? You're switching to my view, right? You want to escape your problem and get into the delineation between natural and non-natural, which I can actually.
I'm saying you're deceived. You think you have a mind, you think you have a self, but you don't. You think
When you
there's
say
consciousness,
you,
but there isn't.
Look, that's self-defeating. If you don't think, you're saying you, which is presumably implying a point of view, right?
It's just language.
I don't know what
It's
you mean.
it's just the way we robots
Do
communicate.
you know how to distinguish a philosophical dispute and a semantic dispute?
Yeah, I'm saying you're just
There's two different kinds of disputes, right? Presumably, we're having a philosophical dispute. That's to say some kind of conceptual disagreement. We're not disagreeing about the words, as I can see. I don't know, right? Because I've agreed to do an internal critique of your notion of natural, right? Your notion of natural just means everything, right? Which means that to say that there's some natural thing doesn't add anything to the object in terms of.
And to say that there's something other than natural doesn't add anything.
Look, okay.
Or does it?
Just to for sake of argument, let's say there's no such thing as the non-natural. Let's say I'm wrong. You still have a problem on your hands.
What problem is that?
I've repeated it like 3 times.
Say it in one sentence.
Yes.
What's the problem with naturalism?
The problem with defining everything as natural is that the word natural becomes vacuous.
Okay. But
Okay.
there's no, okay, go on.
Okay, so when you predicate an object as being natural, that's supposed to be informative, right?
Well, it's just for people like you who are deceived, we use that word.
Okay, I'll grant it. Let's say I'm deceived. You can't escape the objection.
Well, the only objection I'm making is that what you're talking about doesn't add anything.
Sure, I could be deceived, but you still have to reply to my rebuttal or my objection to your view.
Which is?
This is the 5th time. Right? Let me repeat it again for you.
I'm not adding anything, right?
So you don't escape. Let's just grant that you're right about my deception. I'm deceived about the non-natural. Okay? So that way you can't dodge the question.
It's programmed in you.
Okay? So moving on.
I don't blame you.
If you define everything as natural, that means that to say that something is natural is just to say that it's part of everything or that it's a thing,
Yeah,
right?
Except for when I'm talking to people
I
like
said
you.
that wrong. I have to repeat myself.
Then
Right?
it has meaning.
Well,
Because
do you
it's
think that?
self-deceived people like you.
Do you know the difference between like something meaningful and something
Do
vacuous?
you know the difference between?
Do you know the difference between vacuous and meaningful? Look, is it meaningful to say an object is an object?
So it's rather obvious that he is just attempting to like slough off and make little jokes and snide comments about the points that are being made without actually addressing the substance.
Yeah, he
and
tried
the
to
way
shift the burden.
Well, he's trying to say that it's the negation of what you're saying. He's saying your supernatural isn't legitimate or whatever. That's not, it's kind of like lack theism or whatever, but seems to me it comes down to the contingency argument is where his problem is with naturalism, infinite regress or not.
I'm not so sure. That's not the argument I'm making here, though. The point is that if he thinks everything is natural, then saying that some object is natural is not saying much. It's just saying an object is an object.
Yeah.
Yeah, he thinks here, and I try to explain the difference. I mean, I end up saying you're just not a very serious interlocutor, but and that was the end of the conversation.
I'll hear that. Let's go.
It is, clearly, right?
It
A
is.
is A. But an object as an object is vacuous. It's not informative. Do you understand the distinction between meaningful and vacuous, being something that a vacuous statement?
Do I understand the difference between meaningful and a vacuous statement?
Sorry. I think I don't. I forget
Yeah, I think most of what you're spewing is vacuous.
Yeah, you're not a very serious interlocutor, are you?
Danny, if
You can
I'm
stop
doing
it there.
seriousness as you deserve.
I have to go in 4 minutes, Nathan. So you can say what you have to say, and I'll respond once, and then you can have the last word.
okay,
Can I just ask you, Danny, are you the Danny of the Tom Rabbit Discord server fame?
Sorry, what?
Are you the Danny of the... Oh
Yes.
my god. Have I earned my yellow belt now?
Look, I
Okay.
didn't know I was a big deal, but apparently I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't.
You're good.
I don't know how you
I
do
enjoyed
it.
the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, well,
do you think, Danny, if Doug added like some random predicate to thing, so he said it's an Xified thing, would that then undercut your objection there?
okay.
If
I
you
have to understand what you're saying. If let's say some kind of variable that I don't know, that a thing is X, right?
Yeah.
Now,
It's an F, sorry, just for consistency. So let me say what I think you're saying. So I think you're saying, well, it's okay for me to say, because I'm saying it's a supernatural thing. So I'm giving you some more information about it. So I'm not just saying it's a thing. But if Doug just added some random like predicate from his worldview about what minds are, it's an F thing, wouldn't that then be satisfying all the criteria?
It depends on what he means by F. Look, the objection I'm giving doesn't apply to the people that accept the distinction, right? If you think that there's a distinction between the natural and the non-natural, then the objection doesn't apply, because then it's informative to say that something's natural versus something that's supernatural. If you think the
We can stop it
non-natural
here.
is incoherent, that's to say
There's not much.
reject the distinction, right? Then suddenly we only have one ontological category, right?
Yeah, that was weird. That was a weird one.
Then suddenly we only have
Okay, so what was Smokey asking me? Calling Maddox to come confront Will Kincaid. Okay, so what do you guys think? Should I share Smokey's Twitch Twitch stream and then call in on my phone to to debate Will Kincaid? What do y'all think about that? Let me see if I can do this. We'll keep this short.
Sounds doable.
Let me see if I can do this. If I can, I will do it, and I'll like bounce off for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back. Let's see. Okay, are y'all? Well, I'm setting this up. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Snowflake.
Well, like
Snowflake's fault.
the different. Let's say like wait, let me answer his question, guys. So let's say
Let's make sure we're going live.
image it's supposed to be showing that would be specified complexity with all the like pixels or whatever.
Okay, was audio coming through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of the Twitch stream, yeah, it was coming through.
Also just as complex, but there's no specification to it.
Yes.
I'm going
But you're looking
to
at humanity
hop on my phone.
and
I'll be back.
saying,
You'll see
this
me in a
is
minute.
where I want to be. How do I get
No,
there?
I'm not. I'm talking
What if
about
humanity
at the
just
chemical
was,
level.
or
I'm
a
talking about at the
dog,
chemical level. Quit straw manning me. I'm talking about at the chemical level. Chemicals don't do that.
They don't. Okay. First
We've
of
never
all,
had any observation that they might do that. There is zero scientific basis to think that they might
Will
self-complexify like
you know what
that.
chirality
There's no
is?
basis for it.
you just use an analogy that's not even like comparable.
The analogy is
you
just
started
to
with a
communicate
destination.
with you. The facts
You
are the
started
facts.
with
I'm just trying to
supposed
communicate.
to. Well, I can't do anything with supposed to. You it's dead on arrival. Because you're saying that life is supposed to do X, Y, or Z on a chemical level. Because first of all, the
I'm saying that
TV
life
isn't a
cannot
chemical
form
reaction, but
chemically.
whatever.
That's not possible. There's no nothing in observation that suggests it's possible for life to form
Here he
chemically
is.
naturally.
Here, let's hand it over.
Finally,
Let's hand it over. Hold on. Let's hand it over.
LPP.
Hold on.
Okay, so
DNA
is not a code, Maddox.
DNA is not a code, Maddox. Go ahead.
Hey, Smokey, hang on. So I am
right now I am sharing your Twitch on my YouTube stream.
I'm gonna hello everyone. We're famous.
Uh-oh, is this a crossover episode?
So I've left that stream going. I hopped over on my phone to
I love it.
Here.
regret it. I love it.
So what? And Smokey, given the fact that there has been controversy, shall we say, about copyright infringement by certain individuals, I'm going to assume that you have no issue in freely grant me permission to be live sniping your Twitch stream on my YouTube live stream.
Absolutely. I fully give you permission. And actually, aside from me giving you full permission, I'm not a degenerate, thieving, perjurous scumbag that would do that to someone. So you have that going for you.
Well, okay. And then in line with that, Smokey, if you would like to clip this from my live stream on YouTube and upload to your YouTube, I also grant permission on that side. And there will be no copyright infringement perpetuated by yours truly.
Outstanding.
Okay,
Shout out to
what
LPG.
kind of,
Thank you, brother.
so what kind of dumbassery is being spewed by Will Kincaid?
Will Kincaid is saying that DNA is not actually a code.
Well, let me ask you first question. Will, are you?
He almost said it. Freudian
slip. Interrogation, right?
So, Will, are you stating that there is no code housed within the DNA, or are you only arguing that the DNA itself is not the code?
That the DNA is not itself a code, and I'll add the additional information of, because it seems like a code would. It implies that a code needs to be deciphered or can be deciphered. That there was intent in the arrangement of the DNA, of the amino acids, etc. That somebody manipulated that stuff. Now, on the one hand, I think that humans were directly created by God. On the other hand, I'm saying it's not impossible that this shit arranges itself in these patterns on its own, here and elsewhere. I'm sorry, was that too retarded? Do you need me to?
No, you cut out there for a second. I think I got most of what you said. So I guess question number one would be, you stated that it couldn't, something effective, like it couldn't be deciphered and decoded, right?
When you're, well, okay, let me phrase it this way. So like a computer code, for example, is deliberately arranged, like binary, for example, or hexadecimal is deliberately arranged so as to transmit a piece of information to perform a specific function. What I'm saying is that the amino acids, because of how they interact on the submolecular level, right, they just form chains in specific configurations, of which there are only a finite number of configurations between any 2 or 4. So the problem is that I believe that it's not a, yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're gonna have to dumb this down for you, obviously. Okay, so in below the programming, like the higher level programming languages, JavaScript, PHP, C++, etc. What does that get translated into?
Well, I think I just said it. It's, you said the below that.
Yeah. What is it? What does that get compiled when you run that through a compiler? What does that get translated into?
Hex, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but then you have a specific. Okay, so you have like Unicode, ASCII, right?
Right.
Okay, so that is binary representation code base of a finite alphabet set, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're actually talking. So when you're talking about like overall function doing the conditional comparison, you were talking about at the higher level language versus like Unicode, block code, but all the way down to the character encoding, right?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay, so does every code base, as a fundamental in communication theory, does every single one of them require finite alphabet sets, source and translation?
They must necessarily.
So you agree it's a necessity in order to be considered a code. It has to have that, right?
Right.
Okay.
There's a
So,
part that's missing here, but I feel like you'll probably get to it in a minute.
so are you suggesting that the 64 codons would represent the 20 amino acids and the start-stop codons respectively, and do a 3-to-1 coding process? Are you suggesting that those do not represent finite alphabet sets?
No, I'm not.
So are you saying
what
it is a code?
the,
So you're saying it is a code, or you're saying it's not a code?
okay, the problem here is that the code set is put in deliberately, and then if it
No.
if,
That has nothing to do with whether or not it is code or is in terms of the alphabets. We're talking about the alphabets. We're talking about intent, and I'm not talking about the philosophical questions behind this. We're talking about whether or not the
because now we're going from like a math problem to a language problem.
The codons, which represent amino acids, are they representative or not?
They're representative, yes.
Okay, so from a chemical perspective, do the 3 base pairs that make up a codon, do they chemically interact with the amino acid they represent, or are they transformed into the said amino acid?
Run that by me one more time, sorry.
Does the codon chemically become the amino acid it represents, or does it represent it?
The codon becomes what it represents.
So you're saying that there's a chemical transformation of the nucleotides into the amino acid?
That would be what it would suggest, as far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay, then obviously you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Okay, cool.
Because the codon does not chemically interact with the amino acid. There is literally from a coding perspective, requires a translation, an adapter, a key of some kind to facilitate the translation process. So this is a communication theory basics 101. So the tRNA acts as that adapter molecule in this context to facilitate the transmission or the translation. Sorry. There is no chemical interaction between the codon that represents said amino acid and the actual amino acid. So, it is purely representative. This is well established. There's papers at the Yin Yang written on this subject. Do you still hold that it is not a code?
I would have to submit.
Roboting. Robot dodge. Robot dodge.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, no. I'm saying yes. I'll say yes again. Can you still hear me? Hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were roboting to dodge answering the question. I'm messing with you.
Yeah. No.
So I didn't hear your response. So are you conceding or still maintaining?
Yeah, I'm conceding. Yeah.
So it is a code?
Yeah, it's a code.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm glad we're able to establish
Thanks,
that.
Maddox.
The issue was that I assumed that a code would necessarily have to be deliberate to meet the definition of a code.
No, well, I mean, it can have a deliberate outcome, but in terms, but here's one of the other key factors that you must always consider in this context is a code by definition is something that can be decoded, right? That's one of like the fundamental principles, and
Maddox, you still there?
Hey.
And DNA can be decoded. Okay, there we go.
Okay, yeah. Nicholas
I'm
got
gonna use
it.
that from now on.
Well, yeah, that's the
an
thing
easy
is
way.
that there's plenty of things in the universe that we can observe that can be decoded, but does that make it a code? I guess the answer is yes.
Name
Well,
one.
if you can decode it, it is a code, but a code has those character equivalences. So just being able to like
It's 1 to 1.
make a record of it or describe it mathematically, that's not the same thing as decoding.
Like patterns of light in the upper ionosphere. That's why I use the fucking northern lights and changing that into a sequence of. Yeah, that's what I was saying is that you could fundamentally deconstruct.
All right, I'm back. That was my phone died. Well, that was entertaining. Did that come through?
I didn't
Danny?
even realize that was live.
Yeah, that was happening over on Smokey's Twitch. So Smokey Tog got Smokey temporarily suspended from being able to do live streams. So he's doing it over on Twitch. That's what I was joking about on the freedom to stream. Sixed, how are you?
I'm good. Sorry, I had to unmute.
No worries. Welcome to the stream.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's my second stream.
I might come back. I got to go, but thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it, Danny. You have a good night, man.
See ya.
Yeah, I know you came on a couple weeks ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago. I'm pretty much just a layman, but I don't know. I like to listen and throw out my dumb ideas and thoughts every once in a while. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. You ever feel like I feel like evolution is so it's just so accepted in the common like place, and I've been trying to find a way to interject another opinion or like a different point of view into that. You know, I just feel like I don't know. I guess I've had questions about evolution, and I've kind of doubted it as far as like it's not about necessarily the like evolution and the idea of like, you know, adapting or like mutations or anything like that, as much as it is the grand narrative behind it that I've always kind of had a problem with. And I don't know, I feel like there's no better way to help persuade people to a different point of view than to educate yourself.
Yeah, it's the point you're making there. I mean, I think a lot of people are facing similar questions in their own minds, but I think many are very tentative about actually addressing them. And it's kind of it is so widely, well, the perception is that it's so widely accepted. And it goes back to the whole principle that, you know, the 10% can control the 90, the remaining 90. And it's whoever's the loudest and speaks with the most confidence. I mean, it's well established principles that's been around, you know, pretty much since the dawn of time, right? People figure this out pretty quickly. And in the modern era, we have such a rigidly controlled academic power base, and then a media that that perpetuates it. They're also brainwashed themselves, and people don't want to they don't want to actually think for themselves, and that's the very disturbing thing, right? So you've got the Evo activists that, at least the ones here on YouTube, I strongly feel that a good percentage of them are so active because they recognize that because of their atheistic worldview and the fact that they're aggressively perpetuating it, if the facade of confidence in evolutionary theory cracks, right? Given what we now know about biological systems, right? If at any point evolution can't explain it, then their entire atheistic worldview collapses, because now you can't reach it. It's implausible, right? The only rational conclusion at that point is God must exist, especially with what we now know, right? And when you're getting into multiplexing codes, you've got nanomachine freaking robots, you've got quantum level computation going on in a wet system. I mean, it's like, you really think about that, of, oh yeah, photosynthesis. You're just maintaining controlled quantum states in order to have 100% energy transfer efficiency. Like, what? You know, like, hang on. Best case scenario, we're getting like 40% on our solar panels, and plants are doing it at 100% through quantum control. Like and this was one of the supposedly first things that evolved. Get out of town, man. Like that's where we're going, right? Of people actually have to start truly either ignoring it and refusing to contemplate, or start to actually think about what is the whole purpose of my screen name, right? What is the logical, plausible, and probable conclusion based on what we now know?
Yeah, I like your screen name for that reason. It's kind of almost directionary in a way of thinking. But I was gonna say, yeah, the YouTube Evo evangelists, it's odd to me because they kind of like they almost like they fancy themselves intellectuals, but they're actually kind of lazy as far as like trying to think through things, or like they don't want to take it's like they want to be intellectual with things that they can read or be informed on, but they don't want to go off of like a certain script. And I find it very interesting. Like I said, I think I said this whenever I came on a couple weeks ago, and like whenever I see you debate on like a modern day debates or something like that, I look at the chat or the comments, and it seems like it's almost like people are just in a different world or something, because the replies that they come up with, it's like they're not talking about anything that you actually said. And I'm like, I don't know. It's just so strange to me.
Well, it truly is. I mean, I agree, I know exactly what you're talking about. It really is fascinating. I mean, I triggered some atheists with my atheist Fantasyland projection complex video and the Droid C desperate rejection of intelligent design condition. They got a bunch of them got pissed off at me, and I'm like, where do you think the inspiration for those tongue-in-cheek but quasi-serious videos came from? Like, I read the comments, and you literally state the direct antithesis of what the point was. Like, I'll dumb it down and be like, hey, Evo, I'm literally dumbing this down right now. Here is what the basics are, right? And then you didn't say that. Or like, I said it. I repeated myself. I said it again, repeated it again. Like, I don't know how many more times you have to, explain, the basic concepts. And then if you're going to tell me that's not what I said, when I've clearly defined what I am saying, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
it's just like do you think it's just like a cognitive dissonance that they have?
Yeah.
Or do you think that they just want to?
You have a mental disorder.
What's up, Will?
I was saying that atheist has a mental disorder. They're brain dead atheists.
Well, with what you were saying, I don't disagree with you. I've actually kind of been thinking about that a little bit of, I want to put this in the context of YouTube atheism, right? So a little less on like the academic atheist side, but more like the YouTube atheist side. Like, I honestly have contemplated like the premise of does it cause real cognitive deficit in adults? Right. Like, when you think about it, I'm like, you are not using your brain at all. So either you lack the capacity to actually engage in critical thinking, or you're refusing to execute your ability to have critical thinking skills. And I mean, the level of, case in point, like code, for example. Like, I don't know how many papers I have to show going back to the 60s where everybody like established and accepts that it's a freaking code, like the genetic code. I mean, like, everybody accepts this. Like, that's what it is. Nobody argues about that, except for people.
Even
like,
Richard Dawkins.
I mean, even Dawkins doesn't argue about it, right? Like, Now, we can argue over the source. We can argue over the plausibility of it being undirected, not requiring an intelligent agent. You can argue all that all day long, right? But just to claim that that's not even a question that has to be answered, you're living in a fantasy land. Like, you're not living in reality if you're going to claim that's not what it is. And
well, that's why I feel like the people that are intelligent enough, it seems like they're being dishonest. Like it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Exactly.
that's what I feel, and I don't know why they're being dishonest, but I feel like they're being dishonest because they're not acknowledging something that's present.
well, something I've actually, this is something else I've been thinking about in line with what we're talking about now is, we were talking about the false facade, right? And faux confidence. It doesn't, in my opinion, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. The supposed level of confidence that there is no God that is portrayed by atheist activists, I don't think they're actually as confident as they claim. Because, number one, I'm pretty darn sure that God hardwired us to know that there is something beyond this life. But that aside, for anybody who has ever faced death, and I'm speaking for myself, those moments of truth require a alteration of your perspective of existence. And something I've contemplated for years is now, when that happened to me, is if I did not have my faith and did not know that God was with me when I was going through a bunch of crap that I went through, I am very confident that I would have cracked mentally and would not have seen the potential and the bigger picture of what I was going through. And then now, looking back on that, I observe people that I interact with that are going through things and stress levels and such, and I observe the level of exacerbation in their minds as to what they're going through. And very often, a lot of times, the things they're experiencing are not that overwhelming, but they're viewing them as the end. Like, there is no way escape. And I'm like, when I look back to what I went through, I'm like, yeah, if I was viewing this as my only level of existence and there was nothing bigger picture to all, the things that I was going through, and that there was some kind of learning experience and some bigger picture outcome, I probably would also have viewed it as, overwhelming, and what's the point? And anyway, that's a long-winded way to say that I'm pretty sure that the faux confidence and the enthusiasm we hear from a lot of the atheists, I think behind closed doors by themselves, I would be extraordinarily stunned. And I don't expect them to ever actually admit this, but I would be stunned if they don't have those moments of question their talking point.
Well, to be honest, I realized recently that evolution is not a big deal. Like, if evolution happened, whether it did or it did not, if it happened, God must be implying it. It's impossible that just happened by natural process. It must be, it's just the odds of evolution happening without a human, a mind behind it. It's just beyond impossible. I mean, there's just no chance.
Well,
so that's why.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's why I just don't focus that much on evolution anymore. I just look, math. The chance of evolution by the maths is just beyond impossible.
See, I think that evolution is such it's kind of just a broad term, the way that people use it. And the other thing is, when I don't like it because the way people use it is so broad, and it also is almost like a symbol for a larger, like a grand narrative behind the thing. But I know, I see what you're saying, where even if evolution happened, there has to be something guiding it. But I have a problem with the idea of the narrative of evolution. There's just something that doesn't sit right with me as far as the narrative goes, and I don't think the Earth is like as old as we've been, kind of as the evolutionary timeline goes. There's a lot of issues I have with it because it's a whole package that's being sold to people, and it's like I said, I think the narrative, the power of the narrative of evolution is more powerful than any actual like evidence that science has behind it. You know, it's become a cultural narrative. It's in the movies, it's in shows, and people talk about it like it's just a given fact at this point. And that's my real problem with it. Because I I am very skeptical about things. And I don't like when I see things just accepted without real solid evidence or proof, especially whenever they talk about millions of years ago very nonchalantly, like it's a given fact. Whenever it's absurd to think that we know that.
Well,
That go ahead.
yeah, I think like something that Christian now they like should really look into it is that it's always good to look at evidence, but if the Bible says so, the Bible tell us not to walk by by sight but by faith, right? So let's say the Bible says blue, you should know it's true because the Bible says so. But if you want to look at evidence, it's okay, but don't look at evidence to convince you. You got to go by the premise that the Bible said so, so it's true. You know what I mean?
But doesn't the Bible also say to prove all things?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like you prove stuff to people, but I'm saying is what convinced people is even if you show them evidence, they're still gonna refuse to acknowledge God, because the Bible says they're suppressing the truth into unrighteousness. And Proverbs chapter 1 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge and all truth." So I like going from the precept way to show that they don't really have any. If they do not accept the revelation of God, they don't have any facts. They don't know anything to be true in their atheist worldview. I think that's the way to go. Because don't forget, what does atheist say? God doesn't exist because there is no evidence for God, and any evidence for God is not evidence because God doesn't exist. That's pretty much a circular reasoning from atheists. Because every evidence you show them, they're just going to reject them because they do
Well,
not want God to exist. The Bible says that they
yeah,
don't want God to exist.
yeah, and I think what John was saying too. I mean, it does seem like they're I don't know, to have the confidence that God doesn't exist is pretty crazy to me. I mean, I can see where they come from in a way where you have to kind of define what God is to say that
Mhm.
God does or doesn't exist. But I think to say there's no like super intelligence that created, the known universe, to say that we know that there's not one of those, I think that's pretty crazy. I don't like to make statements like that.
Well,
And I think it's a little bit it's very prideful. I would say that I wouldn't want to make a statement like that. Yeah.
atheists just don't want God to exist. Like, if God were literally to pop in their face, they would still be rejecting God. It's just simple as that. Like, read John chapter 5 in the Bible. You see God do a bunch of miracle. Jesus is doing a bunch of miracle. John 6, he's saying he's laying down like his mission on earth. They don't like what he's saying. They all leave. You know when they say, "Oh, if God were to pop in front of me and do a miracle, I would believe in him." No, you wouldn't. You would still reject him. A bunch of people did in the Bible. They saw literally miracle of Christ. They just do not want God to exist. They want to, suppress the truth into their sin. They don't want him to exist. That's simple as that. And if you look at most of atheists in real life, when they're actually seeking truth, there's echo in your mic standing. when they're actually seeking truth, from God, they seek the truth. They literally become Christian in a couple weeks. But most of atheists don't seek truth. But that's what the Bible says. Come to me and I will not cast you out. God is laying down that if people seek him, they will find him. But most of atheists don't actually truly seek God.
No, that's very true. Okay, so we got some people just joined. We got the one and only Salvador Cordova. We've got Standing for Truth. Jamie has come back. Jamie, did you have some fun over on Twitch? I saw you. I saw you were talking some trash in side chat over there.
Can't help myself.
Oh yeah, that was good stuff. Danny's come back. So you know what happened? So Danny had to leave a little while ago, but it was because there weren't enough people. Now that the stream's picked up a little bit, we've got more folks in the panel. Danny's like, well, I got to come back.
Danny's back for more.
So Standing, I think, is premiering a little clip from the dumpster fire on David Neff's channel earlier.
That was a mess.
But yeah, that was entertaining. Oh, and Jungle, man, sorry, Jungle, I forgot about you. You got your camo going on your avatar there.
Well, here's what's funny. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. I was gonna rant for maybe a minute.
Okay. Oh man, and Sunflower is joining. Okay, what's up? Okay, Standing.
There you go. There's a full 9. I'm really happy with how that. Well, it turned into a debate. It went for an hour and a half, so I decided to advertise it and premiere it on my channel as a 2-versus-1 debate: SFT versus Dan Cardinale and David Neff. Which it actually went well for the most part, as in I think it was cordial and respectful, but I think they both failed miserably to deal with the numbers and also the phylogenetics. I felt like Dan was really resorting to some serious rescue devices because let me screen share real quick because I want to show a paper that let me see here. I think it was this one. I got a ton up here. It was I think it's this one. It was on mutation rates in the mitochondrial DNA, the control region. And that
we can see it.
It's like in there. So I'm just going to go to this. It's roughly 0.5 per generation. So Dan's main argument, okay, and I didn't feel like Dan and David Neff were rebutting Ram, Adam, myself. They weren't really rebutting our arguments. That's why I jumped in to have the discussion, because Dan keeps asking for the numbers. And here's the thing. This mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree reflects the DNA differences. And there's only about 22 mutation different between any two people on the planet. That's the average, okay? And Dr. Rob Carter has published on this. It's called the Eve consensus sequence. He's published in the in secular journals, right? He's kind of an expert on mitochondrial DNA diversity. And Dan wants the numbers. So I pointed to him the paper that suggests, okay, the mutation rate's about 1 every other generation. If the average is 22 between any two people, that only takes 44 generations to accumulate 22 differences. Okay, you following? But according to our model, this would be a reflection of a few hundred generations. Okay, a couple hundred generations. And that gives us plenty of room for the things that Dan says we ignore, Dr. Jensen ignores, which we don't, because that gives us over 100 generations to account for purifying selection, genetic drift, substitution rates, right? Because by definition, selection will weed out a lot of these mutations. So I turned it around on him and I said, show me the numbers. And he couldn't. He showed me a paper about divergence calculations on the Canary Islands, but I pointed out that this is based on assumptions pertaining to population history, population sizes, which he more or less agreed to. So I find it so funny, you know. Dan, it was a cordial discussion, and I think it was enjoyable with Dan. I like those kinds of discussions, but this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll yield. He doesn't have any predictions of his own. And he also can't present the numbers, because he literally had to say, if you watch the discussion, I'm uploading it on my channel, he had to say that natural selection in order to say that this is thousands of generations, evolutionary timescale, he had to say natural selection will remove 99.999% of mutations, which is just ridiculous. It's a rescue device. And it just goes to show how strong our model is. And I mean, jungle jargon's really good on the Y chromosome too. So Y chromosome, mitochondrial DNA points us back to the first couple. And we should be very confident with young Earth creation, independent origins, and a literal and scientific Adam and Eve. So as Sal always says, I mean, it's 2021 and the data, the evidence, it's strong, it's on our side. So we should, we should be proud of it, and we shouldn't be scared to present the evidence.
It's just not being exposed yet. They don't want to expose the evidence. Like you said, Standing, there's so much good evidence there. And what does evolution have? Just common, argument that can really fit well with intelligent design and, common design here. But we have like strong evidence for a little Adam and Eve. But they don't want to expose that. Like, our model is way stronger than their model. We don't have to change it. I know science is false. You got to falsify a thing, but still, they falsify like all the day stuff, and they keep coming with dodging rescue device. But we have a strong, model that doesn't change, and we have like good point and thing that we can actually observe. But there is just give it time, we're gonna see it. But still, it's being like 100 years that we're saying give it time, but still no evidence, But it's just they don't want to show the truth of God. It's just that they don't want to go, and like intelligent design will come into scientific community one day, but it's just not gonna be God. It's never gonna be God of the Bible. It's gonna be alien or anything like that.
Of course, yeah. Anything but the God of the Bible, and that's why the scientific evidence for a literal Adam and Eve, independent origins, and separate ancestry, as I call it, I think it's some of the strongest evidence we have, and it's in genetics. Genetics is the most direct way to determine ancestry. And a funny thing, because Dan and I must have discussed, actually, brother Sal was talking about it in the side chat here, about fixation rates. Okay, fixation just means to get stuck in place. That's it when it comes to mutations and fixation rates. But here's the thing, and Dan and I discussed this for about 20 minutes tonight in our debate, and the biblical based model suggests a bottleneck at the flood, okay, which means fixation rates would have been accelerated during those few generations, okay, and with only roughly 22 fixations, okay, substitutions between any two people, which is extremely low. Okay, we can account for that almost simply by that bottleneck, and I felt like he didn't really have an answer to that, because the evolutionists never predicted such low genetic variation in mitochondrial DNA. They were shocked. That's why they invoked the bottleneck to begin with. They had to reduce levels of genetic variation to explain away that which the biblical model expected all along. So it's a great creation.
Isn't that amazing?
Hey guys, hang on a second. I want to I know Sal may have to leave, so I wanted to ask him something real quick, and I think you guys all applies to this overall conversation. So, Sal, I've been looking at some different stuff, and one of the things I came across was kinase proteins, and what really was striking me about those is the fact that they made the gene, like the sheer number of the different types for different actions, right? But the fact that they make up 5 to 10% of the genome of the coding genes. I mean,
you're muted, Saul.
That would be the human genome. That's one of the reasons we're so much more complicated than these prokaryotes.
Right. And to me, when I was thinking about this, of where my mind was going with this is, it seems to me that they almost represent the irreducible complexity of because from one of the lectures I was watching on this, they were talking about like how there's specific ones for specific other types of proteins, and they have to go and fit into the activation point specifically from a structural biology perspective, and then they act as the on-off switch. And I'm like, okay, so if the proteins don't work, without the on-off switch, and the kinase coming in and applying the ATP. I mean, I don't know how you get around that problem. And most of them are like in the 800 plus amino acid length. I mean, that's a mind bender, if you ask me, from an implausibility perspective. So, anyway, what are your thoughts on that, Sal? I know you had some work with that in relation to the topoisomerase.
I have a diagram of what the kinases do. If you can show it, I have it here screen shared. This is from a peer-reviewed publication that I had the privilege of being a co-author with Dr. Joe DeWeese, who's a associate professor of biochemistry at Lipscomb University and an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt Medical School. And by the way, he's a creationist.
And I believe, quick interjection, I believe he's going to be being interviewed on your channel, right, SFT? Standing. Promo time, buddy.
Oh, well. You better show up on my channel first because I'm his co-author.
All right, sorry, continue.
So this is a comparison of the human topoisomerase alpha in other creatures, and then also the topoisomerase beta, what we call paralogs. And the arrows here indicate where there are chemical modifications, kind of like bits being flipped on the protein. And John Sanford saw this. He said, I want you on this project 100%. This is so cool. Because we tend to think of proteins as kind of being static things. This shows that the protein is highly dynamic. So everywhere you see a purple here, that's where a kinase will make a modification, and a phosphatase will turn it off. So kinase is a writer, a phosphatase is an eraser, and the other proteins that can sense what's going on could be likened to readers. So we have readers, writers, and erasers. A lot of these positions here are actually read-write locations on that protein. Read-write, erase locations on that protein. And this thing's very dynamic. And I'm just kind of traversing through the coordinates, kind of quote unquote going from left to right, what we call going from the N terminal to the C terminal domain. And you could see how densely packed. So everywhere you see a purple thing, that's where you have a kinase. But let's not forget, we have these other modifications like ubiquination, simulation. Those are other chemical read-write operations going on here. And that also means for eukaryotes like humans, I speculate, and I have reason to believe that I'm right, that there's not just one fold for this protein. There could be, say, 10 to the 100th power folds, because you can modulate all of these things. You get a different fold and a different behavior when you make these modifications. So you could see all the critical locations here. Oh, here's another. There's a 3-9 where a kinase would come here on this 3-9 and modify it. Here, this is a Y is tyrosine. These are tyrosines that are modified by the kinase. And there's another one. Serines being modified by a kinase right there. And here it's really packed. Look at that. All these purples are where the kinases act. So just imagine all the bit states that this could undertake. There are like 150 of these modifications just on this protein. So if you just roughly say 2 to the 150th power, that's a huge number of alternative ways that it could be folded and manipulated. And so that's kind of showing. I hope you're wowed by this.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, what I find very frustrating, this is extraordinarily fascinating to me. What I find extraordinarily frustrating is listening to the standard talking point of substitution mutations can eventually lead to new functional protein because they're so robust. And I'm like, really?
Well,
Are they?
well,
Do you just think that they're so quote unquote robust because you're refusing to even either take the time to learn or were unaware of the stuff that you're showing in your in this diagram right here? Of
Well,
like,
I'll point out something that even Dr. Dan admitted. I asked him, "Do you think all proteins descended from a common ancestor?" He said, "No." And so they'll say new function, but it's like, okay, it's not a radically different function. Maybe it's just a little bit of a change. So those are micro changes. And I understand why he would say that not all proteins can descend from a single common ancestor, is because when you start to change a protein enough, it stops functioning as that protein. It's like trying to convert a spark plug into a screwdriver or vice versa. At some point, you start modifying, it's going to stop functioning. You can make small changes, but it's going to fail at some point. People that understand protein biology really know this. And when there have been some, perhaps some attempts to take these things and do kind of a global phylogeny on all the proteins to see if they could unify them under one tree, they can't. Even computationally, it's going to fail.
one of the things I was finding very interesting.
Orchard model. It's almost definitely an orchard model. And the thing that surprised me is they're so open about it now. From Speed of Sound to Dr. Dan to whoever I talk, CRISPR. I mentioned that in passing to Erica. She was a little bit shocked. I said, yeah, talk to Speed of Sound or Immutable Destiny. In fact, they were
now see, Sal, Immutable Destiny and Speed they're desperate idiots. Today, Sal, I'm actually going to do the start of this stream. I kind of a little short diatribe about this. I'm actually I've been making it a point to ignore. I hardly ever go on Speed of Pudding's channel. I hardly ever listen to their stuff. Earlier today, I saw a stream of, is the cell a machine? And I'm like, oh, good grief. You got to hear this stupidity. I click in, and Immutable Destiny is going on a tangent about how it's not a machine, because if it was a machine, then it would have 100% correct output every time. and I'm just sitting there like, okay, so if you're going to say that a machine has to be 100% correct every time from its input to output, then why do we have quality control? Like, why would we have error correction, like, in any form? If it's not actually a machine, I mean, because you're going to follow that logic, then you have to say that, the factory that makes insert, X widget, if they ever have an error, it's not actually machines that are doing, like, there's no robots in here doing this thing. Like, if you're going to follow that logic. And I'm just like, this is honestly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Somebody actually make a strong assertion that something is not a machine under that auspice. It blew my mind. But in line with the kinase proteins, this lecture I was watching on the subject, and they're talking about just the sheer number of them in the family of those proteins, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're talking about from an analogy standpoint. Yeah, I know. It's
I like Michael Sheets is like one of the top 20 medical researchers.
It's just analogy. It's only analogy, Sal.
Yeah,
but really,
I was just laughing. And if I could go to my cell biology textbook by Bruce Alberts, who was the head of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Cell is a machine. It's just hilarious, I'm just like, okay. And the point of this is, what they were saying is, just setting aside the philosophical issues, if you approach the cell as a machine, you have a better chance of understanding how it actually works. If you look, that's why they hire engineers. They're interested in getting engineers, physicists, computer scientists to be studying cells, not paleontologists who just give stories. I know that's harsh. You know.
So
Yeah.
So Sal, what happened there with your teaching channel? Is that gone for good, or what? What's up with that?
I appealed it, and they sent me a letter. They didn't explain all the details of how that decision was made in the first place. I mean, I was hoping they'd say, "Oh, we got a lot of complaints," or "Our Autobot just kind of flagged it," or it's kind of a black box, their decision making. And I feel the Lord is kind of telling me, it's like, Sal, you gotta really watch your step here. Don't make yourself at the mercy of YouTube. You're going to regret it long term. Now, I'm not I think some people kind of guess this. My aim is not so much to build up my YouTube channel. I'm really trying to reach out to independent scholars, students who want to self-teach, and homeschool parents. That's really my audience. I don't want to be, I really don't want to be hanging around modern day debate and just, dealing with the dumpster fires. I want to be educating science students. So some of them you see, like Emery Moyna and some of the other biology students and science students, I find that a lot more rewarding. So even if I get to just mentor a few of them, that'll be more, I feel that I'm moving the argument forward better that way by helping. I'd rather help a few people get through school and graduate, go on to get their master's and PhD than, trying to do a shotgun approach. But I was rather shocked. I had 17 subscribers. My channel had some of my latest videos, when they shut it down, had only 3 views. I said, "What's going on here?" I only had 3 views.
It was so shocking. I don't understand, because like you said, it's not like you're hosting dumpster fires or turning this into some huge war against the evolutionists and the atheists. Your material is, like you said, lectures, scholarly dialogues. So what in the world?
I have a feeling that someone on the internet really, I've been stalked before. They really want to just, they tried to kick me out of school. So,
right.
And they probably just kept hitting that report button, and some administrator who probably really doesn't care about a channel that has 17 subscribers says, "Oh, I'll just respond to this by shutting it down." And, if I hear from the owner, maybe that's probably an internal policy. It'd be great to see what their internal policy documents are, but they're never going to release it. But what really disturbed me was what happened with David Wood. He has 500,000 subscribers. 500,000 subscribers. They demonetized his channel on the grounds he was of hate speech, and very vague. And he said, "Well, what's this? Is Islamic channels are on there advocating the killing of ex-Muslims because they're supposedly infidels, and they're monetized. They're not taken down. That's not hate speech." And so there was a video on that, and I said, "Oh my goodness, this is really scary." And then I heard this morning, Frank Turek got one of his videos just taken down without warning, apparently because he might have mentioned homosexuality or something. So I said, maybe that's a warning shot to me to consider alternative ways of reaching out. And in the present climate, it might be that we just word of mouth or something. I don't know. If I could solve the problem, I'd tell you. And I'm in the middle.
Well, when it comes to streaming and live streams like this, and open mics, or just having interviews with PhDs and scholars, John, you seem to be well informed on the different platforms. What are the next 2 or 3 best platforms other than YouTube that actually support free speech? Because I just find it ridiculous. Now, I've never once reported one video on YouTube ever since. It's never even crossed my mind to attack somebody's free speech. Even if I highly disagree with somebody, I would never want them to be deplatformed. That's the whole point of free speech. Living in a free country is, if you disagree with somebody, no matter how badly you disagree with them, then you just refute them with facts. you know. But
Well,
to,
the entire premise of free speech is it's being attempted to be reconstructed as protected speech.
Yeah.
You only have some things are protected speech, but not necessarily free speech. And I mean, that's where things have been heading for a long time. And now there's a full scale public move to try and shift to that being the new reality from a legal perspective. And at the end of the day, the unfortunate end outcome that I think a lot of folks in Western civilization have been living in a fantasy land that it could never be, taken away, is that there's giant portions of the world that have laws on the books that say, XYZ is a right or something else is, a law, right? You can't do X. But then people in power either don't grant that right or they, have rules for me, but not for rules for thee, but not for me, right?
Right,
and
exactly.
We're observing that all over the globe right now. And it's being done in plain sight. I mean, case in point, the Kleinsmith attorney in the whole Carter Page scandal, right? Like, he pled guilty to altering emails that were used as evidence to initiate the FISA court warrants, which enabled the FBI to spy on a presidential campaign, right?
Yeah.
And led to the criminal investigation of multiple individuals and their arrest. Like, he was given $100 fine, probation, and community service. Like,
That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's like that should be.
That's a slap in the face to everybody else.
Exactly.
Like, there is no accountability for us.
Exactly. It's a slap in the face to us.
That's what that was. And when you think about, to me, when you really think about that in the context of, for years and years and years, we've heard that, like, there's no accountability in, the halls of power, right? Double standards, I mean, we've watched it with all sorts of people in power. I mean, I remember when Charlie Rangel had his house raided in New York City. They confiscated like 80 grand in $100 bills that was literally in his freezer. Okay. He was indicted for bribery and then proceeded to never get prosecuted. The indictment just stood. They never actually continued the prosecution. And he got reelected 3 times after he was raided and indicted for bribery. And they found the cash money in his freezer. Like, dude, you're a member of Congress and you have 80 G's in $100 bills in your freezer. Like, nobody does that unless you're hiding the money. I mean, let's get real.
Right.
Nobody does that. And they were able to directly correlate anyway, I'm using that as an example. There's tons and tons of those examples. And then they walk scot-free. And then we prosecute normal people for things that aren't even close on that level. And it's amazing. But anyway.
Well, they have the excuse that politicians are basically immune to prosecution, except it depends what kind of politician you are. So,
I mean, the Federal Reserve's above the law too. So
which politician, which side you're on?
I'd say the thing that's blowing my mind is, and this is going to be another example of there being no ramifications and like the gloves and the facade being removed at this point, right? Is the whole stuff with Robinhood and the GameStop deal. I mean, in what universe is it not outright utter insider trading /
illegal?
I mean, conspiracy and racketeering on so many levels. You're going to literally I'm sorry, you can, everything else on my platform works except
they borrowed the stocks.
Except these stocks. And you know what? Tell you what, now that we were kind of forced to reactivate it, you can only hold one individual share. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, if that's not like, oh, we reactivate it in name only. Oh, I'm sorry. You can, you have access again, but only for one share. Like, what is this? Oh, but hey, all the other guys who are getting hosed right now in the hedge funds, they have full access. I mean, if that's not the literal epitome of like, those in power have a standard, everybody else, screw you. And I mean, we've got this in terms of the economics, legal, I mean, all the financial standards, every semblance of freedom, a free society is being obliterated in real time before our very eyes. And I tell you what, a couple weeks ago, I rewrote a bit. I rewrote Patrick Henry's speech and kind of put portions of like modern stuff into it. And with the things that have been happening in this, like since the time I rewrote it, I'm like, good grief, man. It's getting worse. I'm gonna have to do now I'm gonna have to get to where I do the Declaration of Independence, because the irony for me is if you actually go and read the Declaration of Independence, many of the complaints in that document about Parliament and George III have been surpassed by what is happening in the United States halls of power and other countries, and Canada and the United Kingdom, like I stuff like, but in the context of the United States. I mean, things being done on the state level are just, I mean, they make George III and freaking Parliament, the English Parliament, 1775 look like, very altruistic and, laissez-faire, free society folks. They're freaking libertarians at that point, man. Running England compared to what's happening now. I mean, it's
they want to reverse it. They want to undo the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and everything.
Now, real quick, so I don't want Danny, now that he's got his new avatar, he's been like running around. So Danny, you've been being very quiet. And over on Pudding's channel, you were talking about how you were much more aggressive with them than with us, as they were going off on me when I said that you were treated better on my channel than theirs. How do you feel about that?
Feel about being more aggressive over there rather than here?
Well, I was actually just trying to get you re-engaged in the conversation. But yes, how do you feel about what goes on over there versus over here, or in other channels like this?
I mean, it does seem sometimes it feels a little tribalistic, but I can see a lot of frustration. Like, and I asked them, and I mean, I kind of said the same stuff here too, but I asked them, if you guys agreed on like all this creationism, evolution stuff, y'all probably would be very kind to each other. So there's that, but I think I get the frustration. I don't know. There's not much to say. I don't know what kind of answer.
Well, I guess the question I would have for you then is, you get frustrated with them.
Yeah, the thing is that like, if I was really aggressive here in terms of like some of the things I hear and disagree with, I mean, I would probably get frustrated. But I'm more annoyed by naturalism than I am by Christianity. So, I don't know. So what happens is that I end up engaging more on that front, and so then it just naturally kind of breeds frustration.
So are you suggesting that hardcore naturalism focused atheists are more in difference with you than somebody like myself?
Sorry, can you rephrase that? Like, I don't understand. Can you elaborate?
So, in terms of reaching understanding of each other's positions, right? would you say it is easier, and you and I, for example, have more ability to understand and
Oh, I see. Yeah.
like understand each other's side of the equation, because we both recognize that strict naturalism is just not really isn't plausible.
I think
It's
that
not a
might have
plausible
something to do with
deal.
it. That might have something to do with it. Also, like, there's one other thing. Like, I actually share a lot of your intuitions about design. For them, it's very foreign, right? Like, when I look in a biological system, it just seems it does seem very crazy to think that it has a naturalistic explanation. And that might be because I was raised a Christian. So that's another thing. Like, I have a lot of y'all's intuitions about this stuff, and they don't. So what happens is when I listen to you guys, it just doesn't really bother me. You know, that when you say stuff like the cell is like a machine or DNA is like a code, I just don't think anyone should just really dispute that. And I don't know, like, so there are probably psychological reasons for why I act differently in one server over than another, but I don't know, like, I don't really particularly dislike one open mic over another.
Well, I think that you also get personal entertainment out of the dumpster fires that those streams turn
Oh,
into.
absolutely, yeah.
I think you, yeah, definitely enjoy that. Now, Jamie, I think you had a question you wanted to ask earlier, didn't you? Well, Jamie's gone back over to Smokey's channel, I bet. Matt, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, things are a lot better as far as the kid situation goes.
Awesome. Yeah, the other night I heard you. The kids were in the background, so I bet you were happy to be able to get to see the kids again. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they're with me for the weekend, and I got them to bed and everything, and I was on Neff's channel for a good while, and we got into different subjects. We were talking to an atheist guy named Tony from Australia.
No.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, but we went back and forth on a few things, and then we ended up getting into a biblical confrontation about the word death and how it's interpreted, and the the passage in Genesis whenever he says the wages of sin is death, right? And what it means to be, in a state of death, basically. I gave him the definition that was given to me based on what Chuck Missler, the language scientist and pastor, had given me, and that was that death is supposed to represent separation from God or the source of life, right? And that's supposed to be based on the original Hebrew, whenever he had translated that. And so he kept going back and forth with me on that definition for a little bit. I was like, look, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just giving you what I know. I could be wrong. But he ended up kicking me out of their stream, and I was like, okay, I don't get it, but okay.
Well, it's interesting. It's a quick sidebar on that. Earlier tonight, actually, I wasn't on it, but I was listening to this random stream I came across. It was a Christian stream, but they were talking about some weird stuff. And this one thing they were talking about was in context. There's some like spin on universalism or whatever, and all the way to the extreme, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I found this to be extraordinarily bizarre. I'm like, how the heck do you possibly come to this conclusion that there will ultimately be a reconciliation for all souls with God?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that we got into the subject about. Yeah.
All the way to Satan himself will eventually be reconciled with God. And I was just like, so that conclusion requires a direct contradiction to Revelation, like direct, categoric confrontation. Like, thrown in the lake of fire forever.
Right.
And ever, like day and night forever.
Exactly.
Like that's about as clear as it can possibly be. Like, you could argue that delineation, the forever and ever delineation, is not made about the souls who are not found written in the book of life. Right? They go there, but it doesn't say that they're forever and ever. Right? I'm not suggesting there aren't other areas where you can reach that conclusion. I'm just talking about in terms of like 4 verses apart. Right? It's these individuals going to lake of fire forever and ever. And then it's like, okay, and those other people are being sent there. But it doesn't say anything. This is the second death, all that kind of stuff, right? But like nothing about, it being, beyond all doubt, definitive, no possible exception for, ever recovering from that, right?
Right.
And I'm like, this is actually being like put forth as a actually valid doctrinal position. Like, I don't even like, how are you reaching this conclusion?
That's actually kind of what Neff was talking about. And see, the thing is, he has a different interpretation of the word that's used there. It says aeon and aeon. Basically, it's like the Greek version of what you call an age. And I think the way he used the words, it basically said that he went through like many different philosophers that were, Greek philosophers, and how they used the word, and he tried to give the explanation that this is always in context of the what they're referencing based on how it's defined. So, like if we're talking about something like God, so obviously that would be an eternal, substance or entity. Therefore, if we were talking about God, then it would be something that's eternal, right? In that context for the aeon. But if you're talking about something that's finite, like a person, then therefore it would be something that's finite, so an age. And usually an age in their understanding was like 1,000 years or something like that. And so I was like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean it's like 1,000,000 years? Like 1,000 times 1,000 years or something like that? Like what's going on here? And
I think that verse is the one that talks about eternal destruction, not their torment goes up forever and ever, day and night.
Forever and ever.
But if you actually look at that, it's kind of nuanced. I don't want to stick up for the universalists, but that's imagery from Isaiah. And if you go to that passage, it describes the imagery. It's referring back to that.
What's up, Jamie?
I'm a conditional immortality. I'm a conditional immortality advocate. I believe that's the final destruction of the wicked. And yes, Revelation, that one verse John was talking about is probably the one that's hard to deal with for a lot of people. But anyway.
Personally, I'm leaning towards like the whole annihilationism stance. Not saying that it's accurate 100%. I'm just saying that that's my personal perspective based on what I have read on the subject. But the reason being is because you can interpret. Yeah.
Annihilationism is based.
It's really, you guys, it's so strong biblically. I support a ministry, Chris Date, Rethinking Hell. He does live streams on Monday nights at 6, and it'd be cool if you guys came and hang out and just to check it out. I mean, they like people. It's a conservative evangelical ministry, and they like it when people with other views come in there. And like we did a conference a while ago, but it's really good. He works for Trinity,
Radio? Yeah, Trinity Radio. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, you should check it out, or check out Chris Date. He debates this guy named Phil.
Yeah, I remember Chris Date.
Yeah, there's a debate on YouTube where he does Phil Fernandez, I think his name is. Check out that debate and just check out the biblical arguments that Chris makes. It's pretty conclusive.
Yeah, see, I have way less issue with I can. The annihilationism, I'm not like adamantly against that. Like I can be fine with that. The point I was making was on the whole no, ultimately even Lucifer will be reconciled with God. I'm like, I'm just gonna have to say that. I mean, hey,
so the son of perdition.
Hey, we're getting a lot of Matt. I think you might
somebody's
have
breathing into their mic.
Yeah, I think you have your mic a little bit too close to your mouth.
It might be because I was walking past my staircase and it probably had the air that was flowing down the staircase. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
I'm actually hearing breathing right now.
So, John, do you accept annihilationism or not?
I mean, I'm not really. No, the point I was making was like I don't view annihilationism as a like, oh, categorically, heresy. I'm not in that camp whatsoever. I'm
Right.
like, if that may be true, maybe not. But in the context, when it comes down to like this universalist reconciliation variant or whatever I was hearing about earlier tonight,
False.
I'm like, I'm just gonna go out and say that. I mean, I was using the verse in Revelation 2010, I think it is, in relation to lake of fire forever and ever, that kind of thing, for Lucifer and the false prophet and the Antichrist. But that's just one example. Like, there's stuff throughout the scripture that clearly delineates that I'm pretty sure in no way, shape, form, or fashion it can be construed that Lucifer will be being reconciled in heaven. Like, I don't.
Ezekiel, it's Prince of Tyre. That's where we're clear. It ends with that picture where he's talking about the Prince of Tyre, and then it talks about how it kind of switches over to the prince behind, or like the power behind him, and it uses that's where the term Lucifer is. And then sorry, I don't remember the chapter. It's Ezekiel, but the ending of that is that he'll bring a fire out from the midst of him, and never shalt thou be anymore, is what it ends on. So,
All right, here's my point of view. I think that this is my current state. I think that people that do not accept Jesus will go to hell and they will be burned in fire for eternity, and I hate it.
check out that debate I was talking about.
I mean, it's definitely a possibility either way.
Who was the debate between? So I can search for it.
Chris Date versus Phil Fernandez, and Chris is a machine. Like, he basically shows why exactly every single verse that anybody ever uses for the other for eternal torment is just misunderstood, and it's not.
Right.
It's really good exegesis, and he explains it all. Like, people conflate words all the time. Eternal destruction it never says eternal tormenting, except for like the verse John was mentioning, which is highly symbolic. You can look at the references. Anyway, I'll shut up there.
What was Chris's last name? It was Phil Hernandez versus Chris who?
Date. D-A-T.
Chris Date.
The thing, what you do is forever, and it can never be reversed or taken back. Otherwise, it wouldn't be true.
Right.
Well, here's something that I've thought about quite a bit in relation to, from our perspective, we hold, a lot of people hold this position that there's no way that the eternal damnation could ever be justified, right?
I find it difficult.
However, we don't actually know. We only operate from our current finite perspective, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And therefore, we don't actually know what all chances are given to all people, right?
Right.
And we also, one of the things I've always been intrigued by is the premise that, well, two things. There's the book of life is opened, and then there's the other books, right? But there's no delineation of what the heck those are. Okay. There's also the aspect of, I forget where it is, but it talks about it's not in Revelation, different book, but it talks about how until the law was given, others were not subject, those who came before were not subject to it, right?
Right.
And there's also the clear delineation of the ages, and there's a clear delineation of who will be part of the church, right? So,
wait, the people that came before are not subject to it? What was that?
I think you're talking about
before the
Paul.
law of Moses, I believe.
Yeah,
420 years too late, or whatever Paul says about. It seems to be like there was I mean, you can argue about the moral precepts of like the Ten Commandments, I would say, being around, but Paul seems to be speaking of, you could call it a dispensation. I'm not a dispensationalist, but you could say it would. But I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not far off from what I think, but it just is a different eschatology to a somewhat degree. But there's also similarities. But I mean, I think there's definitely I don't know. I think it was always grace. You know, it's just
Right.
expressed in different ways to accomplish what God was trying to do, especially through Israel, to bring Christ to the earth in a certain way in a certain time. Had requirements, keeping the people, you know, especially tidy, if you will, to accomplish what he needed to do and to keep his word.
Oh no, I completely agree with you on everything you said there. I guess the point I was making is in the kind like what's one of the most standard talking points we hear from the atheists. It's, oh well, if that person hadn't heard about Jesus, how is it remotely fair for God to send them to hell, right? And what about the people in ancient times before this was even known about, like how? And I'm like, yeah, so I'm pretty sure that there's another aspect of all that we just don't know about, right?
Especially time is tied to space, if you will. I mean,
I would hope so, but I don't know.
This ties into the whole reason. See, I don't want to push this or whatever necessarily, but that's why I'm part of the reason. And to me, the Bible makes more sense from the quote unquote soul sleep view. I think it's a necessary thing because of the texts, and especially in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3. But that all of a sudden makes so many things aren't confusing anymore when you see it that way. Like wondering about people going straight to hell when they die, or where are they when they're dead? Like, how do we understand the millennium and like Satan being 1,000 years, like locked up and then released again? Why would God do that? All that stuff. Well, if people are dead when they're dead, like, you know what I mean? It's like Jesus calls Lazarus out of the grave. It's like, well, that just means his body. Well, when he says he's talking about Lazarus, he's not talking about his body. He's talking about the person.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and it's sleep. It talks about sleep, all that. So to me, that helps make a lot more sense out of it. But
what about the rich man and Lazarus? I mean, that one is the biggest thing for me that points to there is a torment that is for those who are unrighteous.
That is
whether or not it's eternal, I don't know.
I see now. I have to admit, I was brought up believing a lot of the stuff I'm saying, so it's easy for me to say it's obvious or something. I don't want to act like that. I think all I can say is, if you read the scholarship on it, it's kind of clear that story, and I understand the nuances that people argue about him using a proper name and all that, but it was a known story, and I think the key thing there is Jesus is saying he's flipping the script on how they viewed how God's favor was, given out in life. Right. And so he makes they thought the rich guy is favored by God, and that's why he's rich. And then the poor man is suffering because he's sinned or whatever. And Jesus actually flips that. And that's what was so shocking. It was actually like kind of like a known, parable or story, if you will. And so
you do think it's a parable.
So yeah, that's how I view that, because there's so many aspects that traditional constructs of the idea of how hell works and all that, you can't, the details, the things that are going on are just so over the top or whatever, hyperbole. It seems that can help bring that into focus. Maybe, I don't know.
Right. Well, it also says that they were able to discuss, because if you think about that passage, it talks about how Lazarus, the rich man was able to speak to Lazarus from across this void or this chasm, and he could even see Abraham. He was actually making contact with Abraham, who had Lazarus in his bosom apparently. And the thing is, like, my understanding is that we're supposed to be completely separated. I mean, like, we're talking like, if our understanding of hell is completely right, then that means that you probably won't even be able to have that kind of a contact at all. So I'm pretty sure this is like, just like he says, like a hyperbole, or it's like a parable. It's just to give an idea, right, of what technically what it should be like, from that perspective. The other thing with that is that, I was going to say that, so there's different understandings of like why people go to hell and then stay there forever. But my understanding, if we were to assume the perspective that you do stay there forever, right, and you're just tormented day and night, that would be that obviously you're not going to stop sinning, right? Like, you're going to continue to sin and rack up even further debt. Does that make sense? So, I mean, maybe there was like a finite crime, and that did come with a finite punishment. But because you continue to sin while you're in hell, that will just further compound your sentence. Does that make sense? And so
yeah, but
pretty
it
much no
sounds
matter
like
what you
vain
do.
philosophy. to me.
I think you have to say that, but the
I
problem is
really just want to say, what does Scripture say?
Right.
And I'll take that.
Yep. I think you just have to be careful in Revelation, just because of it's got like over 400 references of symbols, and a lot of them are actually given if you're careful with the text and read the context, like the and people want to define death as spiritual death, but consider this back in Genesis, and I think Neff was probably saying this too, but I don't do the Ionios definition thing. I say fine, it's forever, and it's saying their destruction, it will last forever. But in Genesis, think about this, you guys. Something I've been thinking about lately. I posted this on my Facebook. Not that anybody ever looks at it, which is fine. But the death, we all know as young Earth creationists, those who are, that the wages of sin was physical death, that we die now because of that sin. And people always emphasize the thing the devil said, you shall be as God, knowing good and evil. And then he says, but people so often want to push that and saying, it's like this idea that you're gonna be your own God or whatever. And maybe that's true. But if you consider the part where it says you'll be like God, knowing good and evil, that wasn't really a lie, because they learned evil when they sinned. They did become like God in that way. And so I would say I can go either way on that being part of the lie. But when Jesus says he was a liar from the beginning, what's the clear lie is that God says, in the day you eat, you shall surely die. And the serpent says, you shall not. So that's clearly the lie, because in the New Testament writers say God cannot lie. I almost wonder if they're referring to this first lie, where it's a clear opposite of what God said. And so
dying, you will die.
And intuitively, we all know that's what happened because of sin. We now physically died. And so
there's two interpretations as well as to like what that means to in that day you shall surely die. So obviously Adam died within 900 years, and there's the passages that talk about how 1 day to the Lord is as 1,000 years. So it could be that interpretation, or
there's something
it could
to
be
that, I think.
Right. I was gonna say the other interpretation would be that at the moment that they were kicked out of the garden, because that's where God was residing at the time, he being the source of life would be, they would be removed from his presence, and therefore they would die from that, right? And therefore,
well, more
that would be
specifically,
the other
he
interpretation.
bans them from the tree of life. He says, lest they live, they sin and live. So that he literally, they began to die that day physically, obviously, and they were cut off from the life-giving tree. If you want to take that as a picture of something from God directly, that makes sense. But the revelation
I think it's
also
real.
We get it back. Yeah, I do too.
I mean, like, I think in the new the new heaven and new earth, there will be an actual tree of life that we'll eat from, and it will restore us or something.
Well, it's rather obvious, in my opinion. It's rather obvious that so multiple levels. Number one, we actually don't know why the hell we age, right? Like by age, I mean get old, not reach like full development.
I mean evolution.
Once we reach full development, like we don't understand why we break down, right? I mean, we're observing it, like, yes, we're having degradation, but we don't actually know why the degradation happens, right? Like, why can't we fix it? We have all these mechanisms to fix it, but then they just
It's
don't fix it as well, right?
We do know it's the DNA that's being corrupted. That's the reason for our death.
No, Joe, I know that. I'm saying, like, the point I'm making is we don't understand why we can't overcome the errors, right? Because we observe other life forms that have the mechanisms that would solve these problems, right? Like, for case in point, like where are all the transhumanists trying to do? They're trying to figure right now, as we speak, they're trying to figure out ways to be able to take the genes that enable lizards to regrow their tails and such, and they're trying to figure out how would you hybridize that into humans, right? Like, why does our liver have the capacity to regenerate, but our other organs do not, right? Like, so you think, in my opinion, when you think about this in the context of the immortality, right? If you have the ability to regrow whatever, and you're not going to get old and just die of natural causes like we experience right now. I mean, because think about this: over every 7 years, literally every cell in your entire body's been replaced once.
Yeah.
So I mean, theoretically, if they weren't getting damaged and degrading in quality, theoretically we could live forever. Right?
Maybe if you eat live lobsters, then you'll live forever like lobsters.
No, you have to also think
No,
about
it's
like
possible there's a protein in the tree of life that our body needs to replenish the telomeres.
well, and that's the other. What's one of the things I've thought about too? Of like, there could be some additional piece, and this goes back to like, why are we one of the only life forms that can't synthesize all of the amino acids? Like, there's several. We can do most of them, but there's several like key ones that it's the reason we have to eat. Like,
but what is aging too? Like, it's just really just stuff wearing out, and then it's showing on people. So I think they argue over what aging technically it should be defined as. Like, some people say it's like the I think the breakdown of some part of the code or whatever, or it's like some other people say I forget. There's like two really kind of opposite ways of defining it. I heard that Aubrey Gray guy talking about it. These people trying to solve the problem. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and that whole conundrum, right, of okay, so theoretically we could be immortal, and it's not some kind of like, it's not some ethereal, esoteric, crazy out there sci-fi concept, right? Like, it's no, we're actually like, it's totally plausible, right?
It's more of the good stuff we see happening when we're healthy, like just more of that, or a more supercharged version of it.
It would
It's
be that
plausible.
our repair mechanisms are not keeping up with the degradation.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree completely. That's my whole point. I'm like, that's what fascinates me about the Evo. Tonight I've been calling them Evo atheists, right? Like, they act like this stuff is so out there and it's a bunch of magic man in the clouds crap, as they love to say, right? And it's like, are you not paying attention to what we're finding in research and what the transhumanists are trying to pull off, right? Like, they're also seeing the potential plausibility of this. And the irony, of course, in my opinion, is that we won't be able to recreate it, right? We're too far gone at this point to that be plausible. I'm talking from the human capacity, right? Obviously God can, but and beyond all that, when you think about the whole premise of like the resurrected body and such, right? What do we know can be accomplished? Like, we know, diatribing about this earlier in context of like quantum coherence being controlled in photosynthesis, right? So we know that it's totally plausible for a biological system to be able to control things on the quantum level because it's happening inside of our body right now, right? So extrapolate that out and think about it from the perspective of, let's say we now have the capacity to control the molecules of our body on the fundamental level, right? Like, what does that mean in terms
like mentally, you mean?
Yeah. So what does that mean now in terms of the limits that are removed from the equation, right? So like miracles that Christ performed, right? They were changing water into wine, right? Just as an example. That's a restructuring things on the molecular level, right? Having the power, the mental capacity to do so, right? The healing somebody.
That or accelerating time.
Spooky action at a distance.
Right. And
just got water, and then how long does it take to make wine?
I don't know. Depends,
How long does
I
it
guess.
take to change the element if you have control over the minute particles?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is like, if we're talking, we're literally talking about swapping, electrons, protons. Like, that's what's happening. That's what has to be executed, right? So if you have the capacity to do that, that's not some kind of out there. It's not magic, right? It's just
Exactly. When it comes down to it, it actually changed into the substance from one to another. So, I think the one thing that Matt Dillahunty said that makes sense is when he talks about magic. Real magic is fake magic. If you think about it, like, real magic that magicians do is tricks. It's fake, and then it's the fake magic that people think is real. That makes sense to me anyway. But that's
and that's why I get so entertained by the whole Magic Man in the Clouds And like, how did your God do it? And I'm like, did you not listen to the words that just came out of my mouth? I am stating directly, bluntly, clearly, that way I think it happened and the way it's done is God is able to control the laws, the natural laws that he created. And therefore,
because he made them.
and therefore, since what are we trying to accomplish in origin of life research as an example, right? Like, we're trying to figure out what chemical processes would have to have been executed in what order in order to reach the necessary outcome for what we observe as life, right? Well, if you're the ultimate engineer and you are able to do on the molecular level and the atomic level what we are kind of can do, but just not very well, right? It's not that implausible, right? It's totally reasonable. I mean, theoretically, with an infinite amount of time, humans would probably figure out how to do it.
Look
At
up
some
James
point.
Tour and nano machines and Jesus or something. This video,
Like,
he talks
maybe-
about how he sees that being plausible, and like sometime in the future, if we're still doing our thing here, that you could eventually manufacture. And I think this comes from Richard Feynman, who theorized these ideas first, in as far as scaling and stuff of industry and mechanical, whatever, mechanical industry or whatever, robots, whatnot. On the molecular level, he says you can go scale all the way down. I mean, things are different, like the way things move and how that works, but you can do it. And James Tour talks about that in one of his lectures. I think it's called Nano Machines and something about Jesus, something like that. And he says he sees that being totally plausible, where we can make these large batches of nano factories essentially, and then have these nano armies of material that literally build buildings like a tree grows. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
guess it
that
was gonna be
would
like a not a top-down structure, but from the roots up.
Yep.
It's
But
interesting.
look, I'm a computer programmer. I've made prototypes of video games as I was thinking that I was one day going to actually do that stuff, and it didn't happen. But look, when I make a prototype for a video game, I literally set the laws of physics to whatever it is that I want them to be, and I can change them. And all it takes is for me to type them in words. It makes perfect sense that God said, "Be light," and light was.
Yep.
I could type "Be light," and then light will be in my computer program. It's not that hard.
Yeah. That's the thing that really fascinates me in the inability of the atheist, the average atheist, to comprehend that point. And it's just like, you operate from such a very narrow mind worldview, and you've got these crazy gigantic blinders on to think that you just that point you were making, and I've made that point many times on like computer game design and such too. Like, what, this is not that complicated, folks. Like, I don't understand how you're not being able to like see how this is a very obvious conclusion to reach. It's not a unrealistic one, and one
of the reasons I love it when an atheist will go, "Well, yeah, but we could just be in the Matrix." I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Speaking of that, there's a good lecture. One of those Neil deGrasse Tyson hosted things where they have a bunch of different people from like mathematicians.
I've watched that. I've watched that exact the lecture. I know what you're talking about. It's great. It's a good one.
The mathematician, the African American guy. He's I forget his name right. It's on the tip of my tongue. He's got glasses, white hair. He's a mathematician. He's not a Christian or really a believer. I think he's an agnostic. But he starts there's a moment in the lecture where there's an audience and whatnot. Lawrence Krauss is in the group, but there's a point where it's almost like a crescendo to this point in the thing, and he really seriously says, the implications of this is that this opens the door to the realistic idea of what the Christians have been saying for a long time, in that there could be a resurrection if this is all a digital construct. And he points to the indicators of that in physics that point to these. He's made these correlations, I guess, with the fundamental formulations or whatever he does in mathematics and physics or whatever. So anyway.
All right, you now need to search for that and link it.
You would have to have
I
all
remember seeing this
knowledge.
interview.
Right? You have to
Also-
learn everything. You have to have all knowledge of all the physical properties and potentials and possibilities and everything.
That's not even enough, Jungle.
One of the things I find pretty funny too about this whole deal is like let's assume this premise is true, right? So the premise, the concept that we deal with all the time, right? Of like you reboot your phone, dude. You reboot your computer, your laptop, your iPad, whatever. Like this isn't exactly some uncomprehendable premise of like the new universe being formed, right? Or you starting a new game. Like how many times have we started a new game? You started a new iteration of the freaking game. Like this is not exactly some way out there, and it's only out there it's only hard to truly comprehend from a character inside of the game.
Right.
For one of us
Exactly.
who's outside looking at the computer, like playing with a video game with a friend, right? The whole premise of starting a new game is no big deal. Now, if you're the character in the game, totally different context.
Exactly.
And what I find so fascinating about the whole who designed the designer argument, I'm like, who cares? Let's go down that rabbit hole. Let's suggest that God is actually mortal and just exists in a space and time outside of this one because we're in a freaking video game.
Right.
From our perspective, I like to use when I was a kid, I loved playing I think the first one I played was Civilization 2. Who knows what version I don't know.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay,
I just
so
I think it's 5.
Is it 5 now? Okay, so I'm like 12 years old or whatever, playing that game, and let's think about this, folks. You started from a timeline perspective. You started in ancient times, right? And you could go all the way through to the current time and then to the future, right? Obviously, since you played multiple iterations of that while you are still alive, time passed at a different rate inside the video game
Exactly.
than it is from your perspective, right? And this is kind of where the whole 1,000 years is one day concept comes into play from in my perspective. But
All a fabrication anyway.
But in the context of the whole who designed the designer, we can't know that, therefore God does not exist. Crap that we hear from Evo atheists. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, God can have parents. That has no bearing on whether or not the video game that we're in requires somebody external to it. Like, that's it. That's what we're getting down to.
And it doesn't have any bearing on whether or not he can grant us eternal life.
Right. And it's like, yeah, he's giving you 1-ups, bro. Like, congratulations, you've got the magic mushroom from Mario. Okay, you got the 1-up, and like I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, you can get rebooted. Okay,
Exactly.
And take that to another level. Like, okay, now
I
I don't understand how God can interact with the physical world. Like, that doesn't make any dude.
He made it.
He put on he made it. He put on a freaking VR headset.
He made
and zapped
an
himself
avatar.
into his avatar. Exactly. And it's like, if we want to go down this rabbit hole, this is
He's the main character, man.
So easy. Like, look, I wrote code
We're
in
the
the game
NPCs.
for me to be able to change rules at will
Right.
whenever I feel like it, because I made it.
Proving that he's the author of the code.
Exactly.
Well, how do thoughts actualize actual movement in our body? I mean, I'm not a dualist, I'm a physicalist, but still, there's still something about us that's not just our body, obviously, and that's what God resurrects. Maybe it's a pattern, the way I view it, but either way, we still recognize there's this other realm, so to speak, of the mental, and think about how that happens. Like, it executes a thought, which is qualia essentially, and then it actualizes in movements or whatever. Like, how does that interact? It's the same thing with God, as maybe, I guess, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I would call it the soul. I don't know what you said. You weren't a dualist and you were something else. Is that right?
Jamie's
Yeah, that's right. But I look at it like the whole person is the
Wait,
soul.
what?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you, Jamie. And he heard soul, and then his ears perked up. He's like, "Ooh, philosophy."
Although we've been talking about philosophy, I think Danny was off dealing with the fact that he
I
used
heard
to
a
be
lot of gibberish just now, though. That's
Oh, no.
There was nothing gibberish about what we've been talking about. We've actually been getting pretty deep.
No, just now, literally with like I'm a physicalist and something about qualitative states being thoughts and all of that. That made no sense to me.
Please tell me why it was gibberish. I'm curious.
Well, qualitative states are to be non-cognitive, so
Okay.
they're not.
Is what I meant was like I was trying to define the difference between the physical nature of thinking and then how that differentiates from just physical action in the world. That's all.
Well, I don't. You think thinking is physical?
No, I don't.
I thought you were a physicalist.
I'm a
No,
Christian.
he said he's not a. He said he's not a dualist.
Yeah, he's a physicalist, which means you're committed to like thoughts.
No. There's a difference here in the theological realm here. Like I'm like a theological physicalist in the nature of man.
Evidentialist.
I just don't know what you mean by physicalism anymore.
Okay. In Christian theology, you can look up the papers on it if you want. It's a thing. But
what do you mean by it?
It means essentially it starts with Genesis, where I don't think dualism is true, where there's like a soul that's separate from the body. I think the soul is the living body of a person. So
it started out that way.
But that's consistent. That's
monism.
Consistent with regular physics. Yeah, okay. If you're
It started out being defined that way. The soul is the body is the soul, and the person is the soul.
The point is that do you think you are your body?
That's a question that I've been asking. What I see in the literature, they refer to it as physicalism when they're making a distinction about the nature of how God created man. Essentially, is where it comes from. I mean, you can look it up on Google Scholar.
Look, I'm just asking you what you believe. I don't care about anyone else.
Right. It's just that you are essentially, you take the thing in Genesis where it says God makes a body. It's not alive. He gives it the breath of life. Okay. That's also, translated as a spirit, or the metabolism, if you will.
Look, cells are alive, but they don't have minds, right? Presumably. Right. So being alive and having a mind are two distinct things.
Well, depending on how you view it, I guess.
You just said that some living things don't have minds. So depending on your view, your view commits you to that.
Well, it depends how you define
man is a living thing, but God did not breathe the breath of life in.
Okay, quick interjection here. So here's the thing that I have, the major problem I have with the Christian physicalists is, and anybody who doesn't like cuss words, I can't not use it. So put on earmuffs. You don't hear this. Is what the fuck does I was absent from the body? I left my body. I left my body. I left my body. Like, what the hell does that mean? Other than I left my body and I was still thinking, and therefore my mind left my body. And,
well, in the body would be like you're awake physically and moving around. Out of the body would be like a vision, I would think. Kind of like when people are out of the body.
Okay. So not every, but the vast majority of instances in the Bible where it was like prophecy, right? They left their body, like an angel came, got them, and took them somewhere else, separate from their physical form, right?
I don't know if that distinction's there, except for where Paul asks the question where he's not sure, or when he says absent from the body, present with the Lord. But if you read that in context, he's been contrasting the two.
Hang on.
For me, is information natural or supernatural?
I was in the spirit on the Lord's day, right? John, starting Revelation. And he's taken up. He's in the spirit on the Lord's day and is taken up, right? It's like it's pretty freaking obvious that he is.
Why does he say though then at the end, whether in the body or not, I don't know.
That's was Paul when he was referencing somebody that he knew that had been taken up to the third. That wasn't different to Revelation.
It takes him out of the body. I think it just says it takes him when he was in the spirit. That could mean
Okay, so okay.
So this
I was just saying there are two different.
Okay, hang on. So let's take this away from scripture. Okay, so astral projection.
What? How dare you?
Astral projection. Okay. It is a fairly consistent premise, no matter where you are on the planet, that people who astral project talk about leaving their body. They see a literal silver cord connecting them to their physical form, and they go off into additional levels of planes of existence. Right. This is very consistent, and
agreed.
I had a whole stint where I didn't do it, but I was hardcore looking into it because of my freaking ego. I thought I can handle this. And then I finally talked myself out of it because I'm like, yeah, don't be a dumbass. You're not prepared to go on deal with like the entities that they're interacting with, right? There's clear delineation in scripture about principalities, powers, things that are like not in the physical realm, right? That we're battling against. There's the aspects of being caught up, going elsewhere, right? For me, the physicalists are rather desperate to avoid the separation in terms of being able to read something plain as day, as well as look at other evidence. Like, how are people all over the globe who don't know each other and don't know about these things, if they do astral projection as an example, they experience it in a very similar way to people without ever knowing how somebody else's was?
I have a quick question. Are you a
would
physicalist? Are you a physicalist on theological grounds? Or,
Yeah.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Okay, but so you.
Sorry for being difficult there. I was just trying to. I got a little defensive there. I was just trying to justify myself.
Oh no, I came in swinging. I said
we're here to attack you. I didn't.
No, Jamie, your opinion is welcome here. I'm not attacking. I'm saying it just more.
No, I hear your complaints there too.
I'm more of a dualist.
I have answers if you want them, but it's up to you.
No, I think I said it was gibberish, and that's why I got defensive.
Yeah, that's
well. In the New
I'm trying not
Testament,
to be that way.
doesn't it separate the soul, the body, and spirit in the New Testament?
I would say there's important reasons. I can tell you this. I genuinely am not just trying to save a pet doctrine. I think there's enough clear things to support this view, and then I think also, and trying to be balanced here. I think it's easy to read the way you look at it into the text, and maybe it's not saying as much as you think it is. That's perhaps could be what's going on here with the whole thing about it seeming like, because I don't deny spiritual beings like angels not having physical bodies. I think that's the biggest knock against this concept is, well, why God? God's obviously non-physical and angels are. Yet there's such an emphasis on Christ's body and the resurrection. And this all ties into the soul sleep thing, but it's like it makes so much more clear sense.
Okay.
You mean it from the perspective of a human being.
Hang on. Okay, Revelation 4.
I have a question.
Hang on.
After you're done, John.
Revelation 4. After this, I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven with somebody sitting on it.
Well, if you go on to Revelation 6 too, he said the souls under the altar are crying out, "Oh Lord, when will you avenge us?" I mean, I think this is a vision, a typological vision of the what's going on. John's looking at the sky and he's seeing in the stars, for instance, like he's clearly seeing part of his Patmos. He's seeing stuff that's tied into the astronomical layout or whatever of the prophecy of the woman, and it's obviously Virgo, and the stars and the planets are arranged a certain way, and so and then when it says the Spirit, I'm thinking that's like God is taking him, and it's like a vision he's seeing.
So didn't you just say that depending on how you read it, you can read things into it? I think you're having to read a hell of a lot more into it than I am, speaking for myself. I was in the Spirit that I saw this. Then I'm like, come up
in
here.
the spirit. In the
right?
spirit isn't. Well, yeah, but you can also say a lot of that language is like literally borrowed from the book of Enoch. Like even the part where it says "and I saw," like it's like a, it's like a construction or whatever for talking about the vision. Like I get what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying.
So
But
hang
it's
on.
Is the circumcision made without hands?
Hang on. If you, I mean, I'm fine with going down the rabbit hole of Enoch. And Enoch walked with God, and was not, for God took him. So what does that mean?
He was translated
into what?
I would assume body and the whole person.
Well, yeah, he went into heaven, came back.
So where is his body now?
So I believe Enoch is an exception. And so is Moses. And I actually think that
why is Moses?
Why is Moses?
His bones are buried.
Well, it's in Jewish literature, but it's also alluded to in Jude, where it talks about Michael.
The body of Moses, yeah.
Arguing with Satan over the bones.
But Moses saw them go into the promised land, and that's why the devil. Think about that. Why was he conflicting with God over his body? There's something to this bodily resurrection thing there. He's saying you can't raise him from the dead. He's not, it hasn't been done yet or whatever. And then you see Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration, which, by the way, is really interesting because that passage before the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus says, atheists love this one. There's some standing here who will not taste death till they see the Son of Man come with power. And the next phrase, that's a chapter cut off, but the next thing is it says, after 6 days, we took them up the mountain. And that's when the transfiguration happens, and they see a vision of Christ in his glory, which is a picture of his coming. And then you see Moses and Elijah, the two people in the Old Testament who have stories associated with them. One was taken into heaven, Elijah, without dying first. Moses died and is bodily resurrected, hinted at in Jude and also in other Jewish writings that believe. Okay, and Jude seems to confirm that. And then if you think about this, Christ is in his glory. He says they'll see him essentially coming in his glory. Then they see a vision of this on the mountain where he's glorified, and Moses and Elijah appear. One, you could say, is a prophet, and the other one gave the law. The law and the prophets, the word of God. It's like a picture of that, and it's also a picture of, from my view, there's two people that are that get changed when Christ returns. There's the people that are alive and remain when he returns, and the saints that fell asleep that get risen from the dead. And you could also see that. That's why Elijah is like a picture of that, the people that will be alive when he comes. So, and then Moses would be the people that are bodily resurrected. So it's like a little picture of what happens at the second coming. And
what is the circumcision that is made without hands?
That's God. But aren't we supposed to be getting a new heaven, new earth, and a new body?
Right.
Amen.
Game reset. So, Jamie, I was just gonna ask you real quick. So, even though you're technically a physicalist, why wouldn't you go towards maybe like idealism, or being an idealist?
I think those views are really interesting. I've been talking to Josh Rasmussen about that, and I think that's his view. Because I was asking a question to him: should we really be so airy about heaven? And is Jesus has a body, doesn't he? Like, is he somewhere in the universe, like waiting to return? It's kind of a weird question, but maybe we need to. I really want to tie the way we believe to real reality.
He did say he's bodily, and he's coming back bodily too.
Right.
So just referring to like the physicalism aspect, I'm not trying to cut you off there. I'm just trying to give you the heads up. So if we're looking at it from that perspective, then that would make a lot of sense that maybe Jesus would be somewhere in the world, that we just can't see, of course. There's also the interpretation that maybe there's different dimensions, higher dimensions of reality that we cannot access, which you would, of course, be able to go in and out of at any point in time.
I like that model.
Yeah, but I mean, so if we're also, because I was just going to say, like, if you were going to take it from this perspective, idealism, if you already know what this is, for anybody that doesn't know what that is the idea that you are the sum of like your thoughts, right? So in other words, your interpretation for what you're seeing and feeling and everything like that is only coming from your mind, right? And so those interpretations can be given to you from an outside source, hence God. And so it's kind of similar to the whole, like, if you're a brain in a vat, and then you don't know if there's like a scientist that's like poking and prodding your brain and making you feel a certain way and have certain interactions. But I could say there's kind of like a decent structure for that one, but I would say it's kind of like a iffy gamble of an understanding.
Unfalsifiable. I do
Yeah, it
think
is. It really is.
But think about this. Here's a problem I find with it, and I'm waiting for Josh to reply to me. He's been really gracious with his time and responding to me, but I'll tell you guys when I find out what he says. But I was suggesting that, I don't hold that view, and I think the problem with that is gets to the question about death, and like the lie in the garden was we wouldn't die. And I think you hear Christians say stuff like, we don't really die because we just transfer over. And I think that's dangerous because, and some people are going to have a problem with this, but it's like, in a sense, I think like Jesus became a man and he was God, fully God too. But like it says he had to die. And like, if its idealism is true, death is really just like an illusion. And I think
that's the reason why I'm not one.
And it says Christ became flesh. Like there seems to be an important distinction between spiritual or non-physical beings, like the angels and God, the Father, and all that, and pre-incarnate Christ too, probably, or whatever. But there's a thing about him becoming one of us, and there's a distinction there that's physical. And I think death is a real consequence of sin. When you die, you aren't alive anymore, and that's really sad. And
your body is not.
It says all die. Yeah, it says all die.
Yeah, I'm a dualist.
Jamie, I've been trying to ask, what is the circumcision that's made without hands? What does it do?
I think that's like a change of mind kind of thing. Like it's a change of who you are.
Like repenting.
Like being transformed. Because I think, like, for instance, when the with the mark of the beast and all that stuff, where it talks about a mark in your hand and your forehead. If you look at scriptural language in the Old Testament, I think it's Deuteronomy, somewhere lower 2 or 6 or 4 or something. There's an allusion to this idea. Even the Jews tie the scriptures to their forehead and their hands, but the idea is like your hand. The thing with your hand is what your works are, what you're doing, and the thing on your forehead is kind of like where your mind is made up.
Did he say whether he thinks God's mind is? Do you think God's mind is physical?
No.
Okay, so just human mind.
So yeah, I think that's the basis of all reality. I think that's what you
hold
think
on.
too.
I want to go back. I want to read the actual verse that I was referring to, and then we can go.
Yeah, do that.
So it's Colossians 2, verse 11. I'm going to go back to verse 9. For in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. That's referring to Christ. And ye are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power, in whom also ye are circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, in putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, buried with him in baptism, wherein also ye are risen with him through the faith of the operation of God who hath raised him from the dead.
Yeah,
sounds to me like my thought is that your soul is separated from your body at that point.
The deeds of the body that are fleshly are because of being persuaded by lying spirits, and the circumcision of the flesh would be all those fleshly deeds, which are spiritual in origin, but carnal in nature, but are by the spirits that lie to people and convince people to do things.
I think it's right.
So,
I think you don't want to take it over literally. Like it's about the changed person, like who you are. And John, that's what I was going to say. What you were asking too was
I caution you against the concept of taking something over literally. Do you think that? Well, it's difficult and it's dangerous on a level to presume that God is speaking metaphorically all the time. Or when is he speaking metaphorically? How do you know? So I look at that and I think that there is a literal sense in which God circumcised us with a circumcision that is made without hands, and he cut off the body of the sins of the flesh.
Right, but you still sin, right?
The body does. That's
Yeah,
why
well-
in Romans 11, I think it's 11, Paul says, you know, what I hate, I do. That which I would not do, I do.
It's a struggle.
That's which I would do, I do not. Who can save me from this body of death?
And thanks be to God, which gives us the victory in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Well, you are your spirit. If anything is you, it's your spirit. Even if you're a dualist or a physicalist, you are.
No, I don't agree.
Jamie,
Don't agree
there is one Christian philosopher that defends physicalism. I don't know if you know Peter Van Inwagen. Are you familiar with?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a physicalist, which is just
Like
bizarre,
a regular physicalist or a theological type. Because I don't know what
he agrees with you. He agrees with your conclusion.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not really well read on it. I've read some papers about it and just kind of picked up the terminology from that, and just from the way I was taught and stuff. I've explored other constructions, and I was going to say that, John, about the whole thing with out of the body. I would tend to I haven't thought about it a ton or come to a conclusion, but I think the whole warning against there's the whole question about the witch of Endor, that whole story, right? And was that Samuel? Heiser says it was Samuel. I say it was a familiar spirit. It comes up out of the ground or whatever, and it that's why God's saying be careful, because I mean that's what familiar spirit means. It's like impersonating somebody you thought you know. And so
Are you talking about Samuel?
I'm talking about.
He's thinking about Samuel. I think it was Samuel
The
because of
witch
the
of
fact of his
Endor.
response to Saul whenever that occurred. And I understand where you're coming from, though.
You can read it.
That was
both
actually
ways, in my
Samuel,
opinion.
but
There's ways that you could say it suggests that, and there's reasons to think you shouldn't see it that way. I think it's
because
either
the
way.
witch herself, she's used to working with familiar spirits, and so whenever she saw the real Samuel, she was surprised. That's
right,
one of the
that's
things
the
as
best
well.
argument. Yeah.
Right, and so that's another thing. But it also says that God had allowed Samuel, if I remember correctly, to
Yeah, I
to
could still retain
respond.
my
So
view. I could retain my view. And
yeah, I'm not I'm not trying to disprove it. I'm just giving you the heads up on my perspective on that. So I did have a question. I had it a moment ago, anyways. Oh yeah, it had to do with so what's your take on the difference between spirit and soul? Because there's the passage that talks about, how Jesus says, what shall it profiteth a man if he gains the whole world but he loses his soul?
So this is what's called a synecdoche or something like that, or metonymies, where it's a figure of language where you say like the souls on the ship went down with it 1,000 souls, or
right.
So now this gets complicated, and I think it gets complicated for either view depending on how which view you use. But essentially, like I was saying, like you are the soul, and so you can speak of it as like the essence of your being, and that's legitimate language. But when you want to talk about like the physical construction, that gets down to the philosophical question. And so yeah, there's passages I'll put in the link a really great synopsis of the debate and the different views on the relevant scriptures, and it's really quick. The guys go back and forth giving their arguments for it, and it's kind of short but very dense of data. It'll help you get a really good grasp on the way the two views kind of read the passages. I could put it in the stream, but yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
What about a person with Alzheimer's? This is a bad question, but what about a person with Alzheimer's that's not really there no more?
Wow.
I mean, there might not be there, but of course their soul would still be there. But yeah, I understand.
Yeah, but is their soul jacked
problem
up?
for both views.
Is their soul jacked up?
Well, obviously our soul changes through interaction.
What? You broke up.
Still, you're being
Maybe
built up in who you are through the body.
Honestly, I wonder if that's like a mercy from God or not.
Let me propose my understanding as succinctly as I can, and then maybe I think I understand what you're talking about and where you're coming from, and I'm not sure you understand what I think. So I think if we state our positions clearly, then we can go from there on where either of us might be wrong.
I'll shut up for a while.
I just want to get my point across and then see if you guys think I'm stupid. So my idea is, or my current understanding is that we are born with either a dead soul or not a soul. We're born with a dead spirit or not a spirit, and I'm not sure which is which, but we're born with a body and a soul. When we believe in the gospel, we are, God performs the circumcision that is made without hands, that cuts the soul from the body, and then we're sealed with the Spirit, the Holy Spirit of promise, which is the earnest of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession. So my understanding is that we are born without a spirit, probably. It might be dead. And
Everyone
then,
has spirits. Even animals have spirit, but not everybody has the spirit of the Lord.
I think you're conflating spirit and soul, and we can come back to that. I think that we have a soul and we don't have a spirit. And when we believe the gospel, God applies the blood of Jesus to cleanse us of our sins, and then he separates our soul from our body and then seals us with the Holy Spirit. And that is why in 1 John it says, he who is born of God does not sin. That's it.
So there's a lot of ways of looking at this because this depends on what you're willing to take as evidence for this. But I was gonna say if you're looking at just like what John pulled up earlier, talking about like the near-death experiences and the astral projections, things like that. I mean, he's got a point. This is like something that's been verified from different groups from all around the world, and they all are basically saying the same thing, that you can separate from your body. And if that's the case, I mean, we would know that there has to be an intrinsic soul there from the beginning.
And
maybe you're right.
medical occurrences where people were aware
People
of
will
what
see
was
things.
happening. Yeah, to
You'll
them.
see things outside the room or above the the building that could not have seen otherwise. And I remember
Right.
there's one case where a guy, he had memorized like the digital what do you call, like the identification number for some device that was being used inside of the surgery room
Oh,
whenever he
wow.
was being operated on. Yeah, he literally memorized it. It was like a 16-digit code or something like that.
That dude's weird.
Alphanumeric.
Oh, and I wanted to let y'all know.
The thing is, there was no way for him to see it because he was on the operating table. He came in there already unconscious, and then after the fact, this is also something that's above the device itself. So he was basically floating above this device and was able to memorize the code from that aspect, and that's the insane thing about it. And so these were also. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to let y'all know we're doing a book study on the soul on Mondays at Praise's channel. If y'all want the name of the book or the PDF, let me know and I'll send it to you.
Sure, man, that's awesome. Sure, well, I'll have to check it out.
Please send that to me. I'm interested. I'll put my email in the description.
Okay, yeah, and I'll send it. Do you want me to send you a PDF or the name of the book?
Either's fine, or a link or something if you can.
Okay.
Or that's fine. That'd
And
be great.
y'all have probably heard of like Gary Habermas, right?
Yep, he has a
So
new argument on that, right?
yeah, he has like a whole book that's like archiving all these different testimonies and cases that were like empirically verified from doctors, and most of them is like doctors just reporting these things happening, and they'll have like cases where like a little girl died in a in a lake, and then she was rushed to the hospital, and 20 minutes later they're able to resuscitate her, and she's talking about like how her family is grieving and what they were wearing and what they had been doing during that time period when she was almost dead, and things like that. I mean,
Hi,
it's
Sal.
pretty amazing stuff.
So
Yeah, it's all about his evidence.
Sal, you should join us. Do you need the book?
I was wondering why they labeled your channel as spam. I mean, did they think you were selling something, or what? Why would it be spam?
I suspect there are bots that look for certain keywords, because one time I was just doing a test, no words at all, just of my camera on one of these. I was building out one of these test channels, and it flagged it for spam, and it just shut it down. It's like, there wasn't
what they
even
think.
anyone there to complain because this was just a very private. I really didn't. I think I was even unlisted, and the YouTube bot just caught it and just shut it down. I'm just like,
No,
I
that
was
was
just
Satan,
testing
man.
a Zoom, so there's probably dysfunctionality plus a bent toward deplatforming. I may have said something really critical of universities when I said what you get in my videos is better than a bachelor's degree, and then plus there might have been people reporting my videos, so I just don't know. But the bottom line is this is not a good situation.
No,
where-
that's. I mean, we got freedom of speech.
The evidence is too overwhelming. That's the problem.
Yeah. So
And-
what happened to David Wood, who has like 565,000 subscribers, and they demonetized him and didn't
Yeah.
even give an explanation. Like they didn't specifically say what it was. It's like, okay, why don't you at least tell him what the offending content was? Nothing like that. And he had a long video, just a 20-minute video. He said, okay, so why is it that jihadists or these Muslims will get on there and say, we approve of capital punishment of ex-Muslims
Right.
because that's kind of that's something in Islam. And the guy was saying, I'm proud of it. Why is that channel still up and it's still monetized? And they demonetized David Wood's Acts Apologetics. And when I looked at that after what happened to me, I got really spooked. And then all the things happening where Twitter deplatformed Donald Trump, and then Amazon and Google and all these other parties, Apple, basically shut down Parler. I said, this is very distressing. So the whole thing has kind of rattled me a little bit, and I'm just like a small player. But I had only 17 subscribers, and my 2 videos on chemistry only had 3 views. I'm just like, guys, what's going on here?
Man.
No, it's very
No,
disturbing. It's very disturbing thing.
I think that there is, at some level, a conspiracy. There are people who can search through these videos that have authorization to mute people, essentially, and they're not checked.
Yeah, and they don't have to give a reason. They don't give a good reason. They never gave me a reason for why I was demonetized in the first or second month that I started on YouTube.
It's what they call shadow banning.
They never gave me a decent reason. They said something about my ads were being clicked on, and I never clicked on my ads.
Yeah, George Bond made a really good point. It had to do with them, him promoting like leaving the platform.
It's crazy. I mean, they have a reason, but they're not telling you why.
Yeah. So I think there also there's an internal culture there where, maybe it doesn't necessarily go from the top down. I mean, it sort of does, it matriculates, but they give some of these people a lot of discretion to just shut down channels. So let's say there's some guy that really wants to promote Islam. He might be there on the YouTube team and it's like, yeah, I'm going to get after Alan Woods. I mean, David Woods, because of all his anti-Muslim stuff. And sometimes that's all it takes, and the leadership will just turn it's like we don't need David Wood.
You got Brennan labeling the majority of Americans as terrorists, and he's an Islamist.
I mean, Brennan is a literal terrorist. I mean, I'm not going to go into the details on that, but that's pretty ironic that he's saying that.
Right. It's just he's labeling the majority of Americans as terrorists. That's really. I mean,
it's called projecting.
That's what it's about. But see, that's what it's about. It's basically a takeover of the media, everything, and everything. What everybody says, it's just no longer free to say.
He was involved with all the the nonsense lies and propaganda that was put out regarding the Trump-Russia collusion situation, and he's also the very reason why they were able to process the affidavits for that in the first place, even though he knew that Carter Page and what was it? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what was her name? Yeah, I'm trying to remember what their names are. I forgot their names, but there's Stozak or whatever, or Stack. I can't remember his name.
Strong.
Strong, that's the guy. Yeah, like they were like heavily biased. People that were involved in that case as well. And there was also an individual that was, I want to say it was the guy that they arrested. What was his name? General Flynn, I want to say. He had been working with the CIA as like he was supposed to be doing work with them, I guess, to report to them what his dealings in China, and that's the reason why he was even taken in, even though they failed to report that he was actually working for the CIA at the time to do that, and so he still got sentenced and everything, even though it wasn't really his fault, that he was just working for them. So there's a whole lot of corruption that's revolving around that guy, and I just think it's crazy that he's going to try to say that all these people are terrorists, but he's going to do stuff like that.
Well, somebody mentioned conspiracy. It's not just media; it's other things that are involved too. And actually, putting outright orders to do this stuff, to censor and deplatform people.
Right. Well, they know there's a lot of like truth that's coming out lately, and they've been trying their best to censor it. Like even not that like I'm trying to say my video is important or anything like that. I'm just saying that my testimony video, when I was trying to post it on like other people's channels to say, hey, look, this is our testimony, just so people would try to check it out. I kept seeing that it was being immediately removed from those comment sections, and that to me is obviously shadow banning. Like I mean, who would just immediately delete a link, not even knowing what's on it, unless it was like already in the algorithm to remove something that had to do with a testimony or something like that. That's the way I see it, but
yeah,
that's why I've had to like just put like what you'd have to search for in the search bar, just instead of having to give you guys the link, because I started noticing that I wasn't able to put the links in here anymore.
yeah. Yeah, you can find stuff easily just from the words. Usually, you just put in the right words, you can find it.
No, I have to give you the exact thing. So if I put like just the pigs can fly and then 2.0, like it still doesn't pull up the video. You have to go like and put the full text for that video just to be able to pull it up. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, it is crazy. And they're saying there's other platforms that people go on, and when they got on there immediately, they get all kinds of subscribers immediately. And when I'm on YouTube, I don't know how many, 10 years or so, whatever, and I have 300 subscribers.
Wow, man. Well, yeah, we didn't make our channel till like, I want to say it was like back in June last year, something like that. And that's when we made our video for that testimony. So
Not that I've been trying to promote it or anything, but still, it doesn't seem, And I have something unrelated to evolution and creation and God and everything, a video that of an animal that no one has ever seen before or documented, and I just get no views off of it, basically, hardly.
Wow.
What's the animal?
It's a badger-like creature. You know how in Africa you have the honey badger? It's not really a badger. It's a muscelidae or muscaday or whatever it is.
Right.
It means it's a smelly animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have the same thing in South America. It's almost identical to the African honey badger. And it has the same markings, but the one that I saw was the same animal except that it had a completely white head and neck and a black body, so that it was genetically different.
Like an
But
albino version?
well, no, just the head and the neck were white, and the shoulders and body and tail were black.
Hmm.
But it would be genetically different from the other, both the greater grayson and the honey badger in the coloring, the coat.
Hmm.
But it was because there's also weasels in South America that are very similar and they look similar, but they're like in the trees. They'll go immediately to the trees. But this honey badger thing, it stays on the ground, and even when spooked, it'll stay on the ground. But this weasel thing that they got in South America too, immediately goes for the trees, goes up in the trees.
Huh.
So I know it was because my video is not very clear, but you can see I could see it clearer than my GoPro was able to catch it. I could see clearly that it had a white head and neck, and the shoulders and the tail were black. But
You know, on the subject of like strange animals, like the platypus, I like to try to see how evolutionists can figure out how that even came about. If we're talking about like the
Obviously
evolutionary
a bird.
timescale, and
it
it
had more than one common ancestor.
well, that's the crazy thing. It would have to have like at least what, like 8 or 7? No, I'm not, like at least 10 different phylum.
I
The
really
aliens,
think that God made the platypus just to destroy evolution.
the aliens came and made a mixture, animal mixture, half monotreme, half snake, half duck,
half bear,
bird, half beaver. I don't know.
It's even got venom. Like it has like these kickers, kind of like you'd see on a rooster at the back end of its hind legs, and
With
then
venom.
with venom in them. And so there's like these little sacs of venom on the back end, like close to where I guess its bladder would be.
Right.
And of course, it's got a tail like a beaver. It's got, obviously the duck bill. It's got.
And he only uses it to fight other males.
Yeah. But I just think that's crazy. First of all, what other animal that's a mammal, or I guess technically speaking, a mammal, is it counted as a marsupial? I don't even remember what they counted as. I think it's because it has.
It's a
eggs,
I think
right?
it's a
I think it's a marsupial.
It lays eggs,
The
but it has a
platypus?
pouch.
It might be, I don't know, is it monotreme?
I don't even remember. I just remember because it's been so long since I saw it in textbooks. But I just remember that it had so many different things that it could do, and I was like, "What the heck is going on with this animal?" But yeah, I mean, it's got fur like a bear. It's got these web-finned feet. It's just so much stuff that's up with that animal.
And nurses like a mammal, has hair like
Right.
a mammal.
It has milk and everything. Yeah.
But I think it has does it have a single tract? It doesn't have like a urinary or bladder, does it?
I didn't get to look at its physiology on the inside, aside from just the venom sacs. I wish I knew more about that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of animals that, like even birds, they only have one tract. They don't have urine. But they're not called monotremes, even though they have a single track, in and out.
So George Bond says it's a monotreme, whatever that is. I'm not sure.
Yeah, monotreme is a single track. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think even marsupials have a single track, but they're called mammals.
Yeah. Sal is saying that it has an excellent electrical sensing system that's built within its
Oh
body.
yeah, and that's like sharks, in his
Right.
bill, and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Man, I don't know.
I
There's
think
just
that God made the platypus for the same reason he made Uranus spin sideways instead of like the way the planet.
Sideways, backward. Which one spins backwards? One of them
Yeah, one of them
spins
spins backward, and then there's also
I can't
several moons that
remember
spin
the one that
backward.
spins backwards. I remember Uranus spins, it like rolls along its orbit, like it's rolling on a ball.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe
Like a
it's
ball?
rolling. Yeah.
Which you would think that if it's on an orbit, that it'd be going the same direction as the interlocking orbit itself,
Yeah,
at
but-
least as far as that goes with the perpendicular angle.
But you know what caused that? It was a comet.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
it was
All the
a comet.
all the
or an
anomalies.
asteroid.
All the anomalies are a comet.
Did you
It's
watch
always a
that,
comet.
Jungle? What you aren't being told about astronomy?
I haven't seen it, but I think I heard about the video. I need to go look that up actually.
You've got to watch this video. What you aren't being told about astronomy. I believe there are 2 volumes. So it's like 2 hours of YouTube.
Okay.
And it's Spike Pasaris. And it's just great.
Yeah, I think I saw it. Yeah.
I don't know about the passage in Job where it talks about the what is it? Orion's belt, Pleiades, and
Yeah.
that to me, like that's just definitive proof that the Bible's inspired.
The
Because there's
Pleiades.
even there are actual astrophysicists that have seen this, and they're like, this must have been given to Job by the maker of these stars, because they saw that
What
these
was?
because. So remember, there's a passage in Job where God is talking to Job, and he says, "Who can loosen the belt of Orion?" Right? And he's obviously
Yeah.
talking about the star formation, and obviously it turns out that there's a cluster of stars there that are starting to separate. They're starting to move away from each other, and this is literally happening in real time now. So they're seeing the effects of this, and that's something that was obviously predicted in the book of Job thousands of years ago. And then there's Pleiades, the way it was explained there. It has something to do with its dimming, I think it was. I can't remember how it was described. Oh man, I have to go and look that passage up again. But
Yeah, I got to look into that a little bit more.
yeah, sorry, I'll have to go and look it up for next time. But if y'all haven't
But
looked
it
that up,
actually-
it's really interesting.
It actually names the constellations and everything, though.
Yeah.
And they have the same name today.
Yeah, that too.
Orion and the Pleiades, and it's the same name, same constellation,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah, I had to know a lot about astronomy because of the my job. I was as a navigator, and like we had to know where like the Big and Little Dipper was and how to find the Polaris and things like that. So, and how to triangulate distances and all that stuff.
Yeah. When I was in the military, they tried to teach me how to.
Oh.
They did. I mean, I learned it, but
Hey.
they were like, "You got to learn how to use HF and how to bounce an HF radio frequency off the atmosphere, so it bounces back down." Our master sergeant was like, he could set up an HF antenna to bounce off the atmosphere and hit some, but we were in America, right? And he could hit China.
Shortwave does it all the time, but you have to depend on the weather.
HF. Like, you call it shortwave, but it's technically a longer wave because the frequency is lower, so it takes long. It's terminology.
Well, yeah, ham radio operators do the same, but you have to depend on the weather sometimes. But I have a question for Pigs Can Fly, since
What's
you're a sailor. Have you been watching the America's Cup?
The what is it?
America's Cup, the sailing
No.
competition.
No, I actually haven't.
Remember how they used to? I mean, I used to like it because I was into boats and sailing and everything. I thought it was pretty neat back in the day when they were sailing yachts against each other. Well, they got up on foils. They were using a 2-hulled foil racing against each other, and then this year they came out with a monohull, one hull, one body,
Yeah,
and foils. So they're sailing on foils, going the America's yacht went 53 knots.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's
53
crazy fast.
knots is like 60 miles an hour or something like
No,
that.
it's way fast. It's faster than that. It's like 70 some miles, I think, an hour.
53 knots. The America's yacht went.
That is really
was able to hit.
fast. Yeah, the fastest that our ship was able to go, which I'm not going to be able to go into the exact details of all of it, but I'll just give you a rough estimate. It's about 24 knots on
Yeah.
the surface, okay? But underwater, it's a lot faster. So, because of the ship's design, you know.
Right.
But yeah, so if we're going full speed on the surface, you'd be able to be basically going about 36 miles an hour. You know, considering like
And
if you're driving
that's
on
fast
like
on water. That's fast.
yeah, that is pretty fast. Yes, definitely. I mean,
Matt, are you
especially
trying to
since
tell us that you're not willing to break your secret clearance?
I already lost my secret clearance. It's not going to make it matter. I'm just saying, I did sign agreement saying that I wouldn't talk about certain
You may
things.
not have
so-
access to the information, but you're still liable.
I mean, I remember the stuff. I'm not gonna. I just can't disclose some of the stuff because I promised I wouldn't. So,
Yeah,
but,
I had one too. I was just messing with you.
yeah, because yeah, they keep that stuff pretty under wraps. So, but yeah, I was just giving you a good context there. Yeah, 53 knots would be like almost 70 miles an hour at least.
Wow.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty fast, man.
So they're racing, and it's actually 2 and 3 times the wind, the speed of the wind. The
Yeah, you
boats are
definitely want to
going.
be. You definitely want to try to go with the wind, especially if you're using sailboats. I mean, that's just like a given. But I mean, there's ways to get around that if you are sailing. But I mean,
Well,
trying to go against the wind is just kill your speed.
right, but you're still going fast though. You're cutting back and forth, but you're still going fast.
Right. I mean, so there's tactics like if you have a sailboat and you're trying to go a certain heading, if you have to take into account for wind, if you have any kind of a heavy draft that's in your direction, or at least perpendicular to your direction, you can use it to your advantage. But you have to use hard rudder to get your heading.
Right.
And so that's the reason why you don't want to do against the wind, because if you're going against the wind, you're basically going to lose so much speed. You're probably going to be a sitting duck there, possibly going 3 knots to nowhere kind of situation. So.
Well, yeah, but they have races where you having both, regardless of the wind direction, both sailboats are
Yeah.
in the same race against each other.
Right.
And so they're cutting back and forth trying to get through the gate before the other one, and they go like 6 times through the gate or back and forth, and then they come to the finish line. Whoever gets there first wins. But it's really awesome because they had, I mean, see, you said you hadn't been watching it, but the American yacht went flying up in the air, came down so hard it made a hole is like 2 meters wide in the boat.
Oh my gosh!
So
man.
they had to
They hit a
completely
rock?
replace the whole.
They ground?
The whole section, the whole. Well, it almost sank, but everybody came to the
Wow.
rescue. They kept it from sinking.
Praise the Lord, they got saved.
And they repaired it. And the one guy was stuck underwater for a while. They had to cut him loose.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
So they got it back up and running again, and they're in the or they were in the competition, but they just.
So wait, they lost somebody?
Matt,
Their
did
crew?
you,
They
Matt,
lost
did you
twice.
say they got saved?
They lost twice to Italy. Just
Oh,
the
wow.
last 2 races, so they're out of the race. So now it's Italy and I think New Zealand.
Wow. Okay. What was that question, Bob?
Oh, I asked if you said that they got saved.
No,
They
I said
got
praise the
saved.
Lord that they got saved. Yeah,
From
because it
what?
sounded like they were.
Good.
I mean, because if they got grounded like that, that's pretty much like a death sentence in some cases. So, I mean, it's pretty
Yeah,
rare that.
My point was that
He was under the. It was
it's kind
under
of a
the
jab,
sail.
but-
Yeah, he was under the sail, and they had to cut him out.
Oh wow. Okay, my understanding. I thought you said that he had to be cut loose, as in like he was stuck underneath the ship, maybe being keel hauled or something.
He was.
I was like,
Yeah,
oh
he
my
was.
gosh.
He was in the ship with his, of course, restraining thing and they had to cut him out. But he was actually underneath the sail too.
Wow, that's so scary. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, just thinking about it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember having to like, 'cause we had to do all the drills, pertaining to like if we ever had to escape the submarine, and we had a lot of procedures we had to go through, and we only had about a third of the number of escape equipment that you would need for the entire crew to leave. So they never anticipate that anybody's really going to survive. They just have enough just in case somebody does.
Right.
And the irony of that is that the primary people that would be leaving are all the officers and the chiefs, and then anybody left over would be allowed to leave with whatever's left over. And it's supposed to be based on rank. So it really, you might as well just not even anticipate leaving. Like if you're
Right.
a sailor, a seaman, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's really messed up how it's designed. But I kept telling them, I was like, how is it we can't put another like a couple of lockers in here? I don't understand. Like,
What happened to
it
the
just-
captain always going down with a ship? Is
right,
that
I know,
not-
right? I said that too, but no, that's ironically enough, that's not how it works. Yeah, they'll keep the captain and the XO. They get off first, and then the all the JOs and the main officers,
But-
like the navigator, the engineer.
But there's not
um,
there's
it
not
like
much
a
hope for
Hollywood
them
myth?
either, for that matter.
What was
Do you
that?
think it's a Hollywood myth?
So no, the thing is, like, it used to be pretty legitimate, but I think that they changed the standards for certain types of ships, especially on submarines. So I'm not sure if it could be the same if it was like on a carrier, but then again, I wouldn't put it past them if they have the same standard, as far as that goes.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah, my
that's it.
understanding, and after all the training I went through, yeah, all the officers get off first, and then
Yeah,
it's the
but
chiefs.
that's the army. It's not the back in the day.
No, he's got. I mean, I wouldn't want to call it a myth necessarily. I think there might be some ships that would have to do that, but it would be like definitely a last resort. And
Well, when I say
for
like
submarines, it's different.
like
Ironically,
it may be a principle thing. Like it's not like necessarily a law, but
Well, right when the cruisers, the luxury cruisers, tipped
Mm-hmm.
over and everything, they were criticizing the captain for getting off first and letting
I mean-
everybody else stay.
It's like a stigma that's the case. But like I said, in reality, yeah, the captain is, from my understanding, especially on submarines, it was always that they were the first to go off, and even the XO, of course, and then of course, they just did it based on chain of command. So it was just be the top dogs first. Again, the JOs. Then there was the chief of the boat would be next. It would be all of his under supervisors there. So like the division chiefs, and then if there's any chiefs left over, they'd be going after that. And then of course, if there's anyone after that, so we're talking like first classes and below. I mean, they have what they call 21 man there, which is like where all the first classes reside, and it's really not even enough space for all the first classes on the ship. So to put that into perspective, you're talking about 50 some individuals, if we're kind of the first classes together, would be just first classes and above, right? And so the entirety of the ship would have to be about 125 people altogether, right? That's for the crew. That's not counting any other people if we have like people that we're taking along with us. So yeah, and of course those people take precedence over everybody else too. So if we have anybody that's a guest or is there with us, they would take those spots instead. So yeah, it's really limited, really limited.
so Matt, I'm confused. Are you telling me that I can't believe everything that Hollywood tells me?
Absolutely not. I can't believe you do that. Somebody lied to you, man. I'm gonna
Well,
have to,
it used to be a dignity kind of pride thing back in the day, but Army, Marines, Navy, or whatever, they would probably have their own rules.
Bob, you're gonna have to listen to that song. Somebody lied to us by 7. You'll know what I'm talking about, man.
Somebody lied to us. Okay.
Yeah.
I think even Ozzy Osbourne was kind of like against the society norms or whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, I understand the structure. I'm not saying that it's wrong, obviously, from that perspective. If we're trying to be, from a naturalistic perspective, obviously the chain would have to be upheld by maintaining the people that are above, right?
Right,
But
there's a chain of command. That's the
exactly,
difference. Yeah.
and so losing the chain would be pretty bad. So, but see, that's the whole point. Is if we're looking at this from a Christian perspective, then yeah, it's pretty messed up that the guy that's supposed to be in charge of everything doesn't take responsibility for what he just did, right? So that is pretty serious. And see, even if you're the captain and you weren't even involved in what happened, you'd still have to take responsibility because it's your position, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes the most sense if you're looking at it from that perspective. But yeah, whenever you're looking from like an evolutionary standpoint, I mean, obviously they don't care. They don't really care if the seaman goes down with the ship, he'll probably still get like a purple star or something. I'm not sure, like a Medal of Honor or something like that. In the event that
Oh yeah,
he
that
tried to
totally
save
makes
somebody.
up for them dying.
The chain of command's got to account
I've
for
seen cases
something.
like that. They even had a guy. He went down. Actually, he went down in a flooding event, but he saved somebody by getting them out of the corridor that they were stuck in, and he just relocked it. So he ended up going down with the ship, and he was like the last Medal of Honor recipient, I think, for the what was it for submarines in general. I forgot the guy's name, but yeah, he was pretty heavily renowned in the sub force. But yeah, that was something that happened like back in the 60s, I think it was. They had like an accident, and their ship was basically going down, and everything was flooding the aft compartment. So he was just helping people get out. But there was just one guy that got locked in there, and so he helped them open the corridor door, which is like super heavy, by the way. They have the door to the aft compartment is like it's locked on both sides, and so you have to operate two different levers just to be able to open that door, and it's obviously pressurized so that you can't open it unless you handle it a certain way, right? So if you already have water that's like rushing in, what's up?
Why is it designed that way?
Because if you lose one half of the ship, then at least the other half would still be able to survive. It's designed so that you wouldn't be able to lose the entire crew all at one time, and they would allow the other half of the ship to go through the escape pod.
But
so imagine
you said that it takes two people. I'm not sure why.
No, it's not two people. It has two levers that you can operate simultaneously. It's hard to explain without you seeing it. I would have to be there showing it to you. But yeah, like it's got like a double bulkhead door with a so like there's one door on the outside, one door on the inside. It has two different what do you call I can't think of the word, two different hatch I can't think of the word. What's going on with me right now? They call it the bulkhead because it's part of the wall. Basically, it's pretty thick, and essentially, like I said, you have to operate two different levers just to be able to get into it. So once you get onto the other side, you're supposed to relock it again every single time, just in case something does happen. And yeah, so again, if anything were to, like, say we got hit by a torpedo on the fore compartment, and the entire thing's starting to flood. Well, we just lost all of control, which means that we can't move water anymore, which means that the last resort is to just simply escape, like ASAP. And so everybody in the aft compartment is going to lock off or seal off that corridor, and then they're going to start forcing people to go up to the aft escape hatch and don gear to get out of there, right? And they're probably going to also put the reactor into like a certain state so that whenever the ship goes finally down, it'll just detonate peacefully, without having to like destroy the ecosystem there. Does that make sense? So there's certain things that they have to do every single time something happens, and it's pretty scary to think about, actually. But yeah.
Yeah, I can't watch. Before I joined the military, I could, but after I joined the military, I could not watch movies where anytime I saw a ship go down,
right,
it was just obvious to me that there was a large number of people that just were drowning right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't watch that stuff anymore.
I mean, so like the whole event with like the Titanic was basically nothing compared to what we saw. You know, the events of like Pearl Harbor. You know, the number of submarines that went down in just from the U.S. side alone was like 52 back. You know, in World War II, and I mean those subs, they were a little bit smaller, of course, but they still had pretty hefty crews. But it says every single time that they lost the entire crew.
Yeah.
So their standards for escaping were pretty much zero. So there was no chance to get out. And yeah, we definitely owe our lives to those people that did these things. But
well, yeah, I'm just thinking that in many cases there is no chance for escape in a submarine.
yeah, I would say the vast majority of times. In fact, if say that our ship went down and it went below 600 feet in depth. So imagine that we're like way out in the open ocean, right? And it's like, you know, 2,400 fathoms, right, deep. Clearly, you're already like operating pretty deep, probably like at least 300 feet or more, you know. And as soon as you hit past 1,000 feet, that's already getting close to crush depth, right? So you're gonna start hearing the hull come in on itself. You're gonna start seeing rushing water coming in like crazy. You're gonna start hearing all kinds of metal creaking. I mean, we were already hearing those things without it even happening, as far as just being hit or anything like that. So you come down to like I said, almost about 1,000 feet. You're gonna start hearing the hull come in on itself, right? And you can, I mean, it's pretty crazy, man. Like it gives you shivers. Let's put it that way. Like every time I started hearing that creaking, sometimes, because I obviously I had to do a lot of the fathometer watch as a navigator, and you'll be able to hear the outside of the ship as well, so you can hear it from both sides of the hull, and because it has a raise on the bottom of the ship and on the outside on the right and left, the port and starboard sides, and they also have the total raise, which you can kind of hear things close to the ship that way too. But anyway, I'm not going to go into all of the crazy stuff, but yeah, I mean, you can seriously hear that stuff inside the hull and outside the hull at the same time, and it's just it gives me shivers just thinking about it. But yeah, I just thank God every day that we're not one of the ships that went down. Obviously, he has a purpose, you know.
Yeah, my brother was in a submarine too.
Yeah, I had I'd only ever met one other guy that was on a submarine before me, and that was my good. I'm sorry, my brother's good friend. His father was a torpedoman, and I think he said he was on this Spike. I think it was. I want to say it was the Spike or Pike, something like that. But he had he recently passed away too. But he was. They had a certain standard for their torpedo, and they actually had to physically lift these torpedoes. And so they would have like 3 or 4 men go and grab these torpedoes to be able to load into the loading dock, you know. And they weren't armed yet, of course, so they weren't like, you know, ready to go off right that second. They had like a mechanism that would go to trigger that. But you know, just to consider that, I mean, these things are already crazy heavy. Like, the ones that we have to operate with now, they have to have like specialized gear just to be able to move them from, you know, from bay to bay, let alone put them inside of a torpedo tube, you know. And he was telling us that he was literally having to pick up like a, you know, 1,000-pound at least, you know, torpedo. And I mean, that's crazy to think about, man. The guy was stacked too. I mean, he was a pretty heavy built guy, so I can imagine him doing it. And it's funny because they had a picture of him like lifting up a little, I think it was a punch bug car or something like that from the front end. And I was like, yeah, I believe it now, man. I can see you picking up a torpedo, man. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, man. Like we're very fortunate to be in this day and age where they've actually been able to advance technology to an extent that we're able to have some kind of safety mechanisms in place in the first place.
Now we're
but-
just told what to believe now.
Yeah, more or less. Like I said, I just had to kind of go with the flow and do my job the best I could.
Even though the country was founded on the idea that the government can't tell you what to believe, right?
Well, see, that's the thing. We did have some missions that we're not allowed to talk about that I was told if I was ever asked about, certain things, I would basically just have to shy away from that or just say, I'm not allowed to make this kind of assertion or anything like that. And all I could really do is just, say that they have their reasons for wanting to keep some of this stuff hidden. Although I don't think it's legitimate. I don't think it's a good reason, personally. I think that people should have the right to know things like this. But, once you give that promise, until they disclose it, say to the president tomorrow, Biden says, hey, you know what, we're going to, declassify all the stuff that we did this last 20 years on submarines, then I'd be able to go and say, hey, this is what we did last time. We went to this place and there's very few
but
things I can actually talk about.
I'm not even referring to that kind of thing,
Right.
I'm talking about the platforms and the media that we're not allowed to say certain things.
Exactly.
Even though we believe it to be true and we have reasons for believing it's true.
Exactly.
And we're not allowed to question what we're being told. And I mean, that's just not the United States.
Yeah. I mean, regarding the whole situation, as they were talking out earlier about the astral projection stuff, I didn't even know that stuff was even like a possibility until after I had first became a Christian a few years ago, and this one guy popped into my feed. He was just recommended all of a sudden, and I know it had to be God because it's like I never even looked at anything that had to do with, New Age or anything like that. But he just popped into my feed, and his name is Stephen Bancars. And I guess he used to be a New Age guru, and he was selling all kinds of books and products regarding New Age practices and beliefs. And he came to Christ after a really crazy incident that had happened in his life. And he came to full repentance after what happened, and he started just denouncing everything that had to do with New Age. And of course, he lost all of his followers and stuff. So he was like, I don't care. I don't really care. I've already had my fun in the world. Clearly, this was allowed to happen for a reason. If anybody has not seen that, this is just for anybody that's in the chat and that doesn't know about him. If you are interested, go and check out his channel. It's called Stephen Bancars on YouTube with a Z.
Yeah.
And I mean, he has an excellent testimony. It's pretty amazing. And he's also collected a lot of information about other testimonies that have to do with astral projection and things like that, where people just completely came out of it, after realizing that they're dealing with demonic spirits.
What is his? Hold on, let me spell it out.
Astral projection is that aliens or being?
So it's a New Age practice that has to do with Hinduism. The Hinduism practice of so basically they're supposed to do something with their chakras that allows them to leave their body in a spiritual form.
Yeah.
And I don't know all of it. I'm just going off of what he said. I have no idea aside from that. I don't know if it had, I'm sure there's some people. I'm sure there's some people that would use psychedelics as well. But
what's his name at?
His name is Stephen. So with a V, Steven. And then it's Bancars, Bancarz.
Okay.
And he's got long hair, but he's really articulate, really.
And he's a heretic.
Stephen Bancars.
Oh, I see. He's a heretic. I get it.
He's a heretic.
Yeah, it was funny because I was watching Gabe the street preacher one time, and he's like, it's a what do you call it? It's a I can't think of the word. He's quoting scripture, and he says, it's like a shame. I think it's a shame and abomination for a man to have long hair, basically.
Yeah. You can make a reasonable argument for that.
Yeah, I don't have long hair now. I used to when I was real young, but I just think it's interesting that that's like even a problem. I'm like all these depictions of Jesus and he has longer hair, and I'm like, I mean, maybe if it's like shoulder length, I don't know.
Yeah,
What
and
does it even
who
mean?
makes those pictures?
Right, exactly. That's why I had a question, and I was like, well, maybe it's right. Yeah, maybe he actually had short hair. I have no idea. I never got to see him, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, whenever you see anything that Catholics say, you got to question.
No, I completely agree. I know that it's going to be like a false interpretation, but well, there's also the false interpretation from like the Hebrew Israelites. You know, they believe that he's supposed to be a black man with like like the Jufro situation. And I'm like,
Yeah, those guys
well,
are weird.
See,
Like,
the thing is that some black Africans are Hebrew
no,
Israelites.
I'm not saying that they're not. No. That's all I'm
Some
getting
of
at.
them
I'm saying that their depiction of Jesus is wrong because clearly we already know what actual Semites look like. We already know what they look like, right? And it was a mixture. It wasn't just like one or the other.
Right. Well, these Africans, they don't look like Hebrews anymore. They look African because of the autosomal DNA. But if you look at their Y chromosome, some of them are from Abraham and Israel.
Well, there's the Ashkenazi Jews, sorry, and then there's also the there's another term I cannot remember it off the top of my head.
But to say that if you're black you're Jewish, that's not the case.
Yeah,
because an EY
I'd say maybe
chromosome
2%
and a BY
like the entire-
chromosome, those aren't Abrahamic.
are you going to tell me Amir Sephardi is not a Jew?
I would.
Have you guys
I
seen
would have to
Vocab
see his
Malone?
Y chromosome. I would have to see his Y chromosome to know if he's descended from Abraham, because the claim is that they're male descendants.
So Jungle is racist.
They're male. No, they're male.
Come on.
The claim is that they're
Didn't he go to-
male descendants of Israel.
Right.
That's what their claim is.
Yeah.
So that means that their Y chromosome has to be
Well,
a JY chromosome or an I like mine.
That's interesting. Can you be a female or not?
No,
Can
the
you be a
females don't
descendant?
count. In the Hebrew Israelite, the females don't count. It's just the male descendants
Lineages,
of
yeah.
Israel.
Yeah, it's funny.
I think I agree with you. I just kind of wonder. Well,
No,
because
females don't
Jesus'
count.
lineage was both male and female.
Right.
Yeah, that talks about
Which
how
is
Rahab
one of the
was
things that
in
makes
the
me
line
think
of Mary.
like maybe there's
And the claim to the throne of Solomon is through the females too.
Yeah.
In England.
That's why it said that it had to be his priesthood lineage and his kinghood lineage, because he came from the line of David.
oh yeah, I heard that.
But anyways, there's a whole lot more that goes into that. But I'm not going to go into that subject. I was just going to say, have you guys heard of Vocab Malone, though?
Yeah.
You have? Okay.
I have not.
So he's a guy that focuses primarily on Hebrew Israelites and their studies and their interpretations of the Bible, things like that. And he goes into some pretty deep theological arguments with them because they're trying to show that they are legitimate as a belief system, but they always fail.
There's different brands of them. They have different
tries
beliefs.
to show that they're legitimate.
They have different beliefs. But
he tries to show that they're false. They try to say they're legitimate through the scripture, but he's like, no, you're misinterpreting this verse because of this, right? And he even goes like, because they believe that God or that Jesus was black using the Song of Solomon. They believe that, which is ironic because it's actually talking about a woman, not actually talking about him. Which is really funny.
Yeah.
He shows it to them. He's
And
like, that's talking about the wife of Solomon.
a bad thing.
And it's talking
kind of.
about getting a tan too.
Right. It's funny because they use the word ruddy, that's used there in that passage there. They say that it's supposed to be like a browning of the skin, and that's supposed to be, contextual to say that he was black. And I'm like, he could be tanned. It's the same thing. Suntan is what it means. If you just look at the root word of that, or the definition of that word, it just means that you're suntanned. And it even talks about you being sweat, like having sweat off your brow. Like, what in the world? But anyways,
No, but vocab Malone knows all the different sects, all the different
it's
denominations
crazy
of
the
Hebrew.
stuff that
Yeah.
he's found. So they actually believe that they have the original Hebrew language. They believe that they had like the Paleo Hebrew. Seriously, they do. They
But you
legitimately
can't
do.
even understand what they're saying. They're trying.
Yeah. They don't even know what they're saying at the time. But anyways,
Yeah, they
that's what's
don't.
funny. He went to their one of their churches and he checked out the pews, right? And on the side of the pews, it has like this written language, but it looks completely like bizarre. And then he shows the original Paleo Hebrew to them, like actual Paleo Hebrew, and he says, "So, how did this come about from this? I don't understand." And he's just doing the comparison. You're like, where do these characters come from? Well, what does this even mean here? Because they're like entirely different. They look nothing like the Paleo stuff that you find in like ancient tablets and stuff like that. Like y'all have heard of the emerald tablets that were found? I think it was in I want to say it's in the Great Pyramid, like at the bottom of the chasm
Emerald?
there. What's
Emerald.
that? The emerald tablets, yes. It's supposed to be. I think it's called the tablets of what's his name? He's supposed to be a god of Egypt. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It's supposed to be like a god of wisdom or something like a bird-headed guy. Anyways, the tablet is written in the original Paleo Hebrew. It is written in this, right? And it's actually the author says that his name is that that particular god or whatever you want to call him. Obviously he's a demon, or a fallen angel. I think it starts with a T, like Toph or something like that. I don't remember, but Thoth, that's what it is. It's Thoth, Thoth, and he's supposed to be their god of wisdom or whatever, like the bookkeeper. Anyways, so if you look up that and you start to compare the characters that are in that tablet, because they've already translated the full text on those tablets, it turns out that you compare those to the writing on the pews there, they have nothing adjacent, nothing that even compares, and it kind of just goes to show it's like a fabricated, written language. And it doesn't even seem coherent. Like they don't even have like a book that shows you which characters are what letter and things like that, or how they translate to other letters. So, anyways, that was just something that recently came out about his findings with that church or cult, whatever you want to call them.
There's a bunch of different groups.
All right.
They
Move on
have
to
their
bed.
own quirks.
All right, Bob.
God bless you,
Man, it was
brothers.
good.
1
God bless you
Corinthians
too, man.
15, 1-4. Jesus Christ died for your sins. He was,
Yes.
according to the scriptures, he was buried and he was raised from the dead according to the scriptures, and that is the gospel by which you are saved. Good night, guys.
Praise the Lord.
Good night. Okay.
Amen.
Or,
Let it be
or
so.
good morning.
Good morning. 3:30 almost here.
Yeah. Wait, where?
In the Bible
Uncle,
Belt.
where are you? Because I'm at, it's 3:24 here.
In the Bible Belt. It's Missouri.
225.
I'm in
Oh,
Missouri.
yeah. I'm in Arkansas. So, yeah, we're
Yeah, you're right below me.
yeah.
But I'm
All right,
originally
guys.
from Kansas originally.
Okay.
Sort of.
Okay.
I'm gonna call you Dorothy from now on.
So yeah.
I'm just kidding.
We're not in Kansas anymore. and Florida and of course New Jersey.
Yeah.
And the Amazon.
That's a really interesting story, man. I gotta go for right now, but I'll talk to you later, man, about that.
Okay.
Hey, y'all have a blessed night. All right, take care.
All right, take it easy. So is Sal still around? Maybe he's got to go too. See what's going on in the chat. We got Jamie Russell. Good channel. Yeah. Yeah, I worked with a black Hebrew Israelite, and he said that I could shine his shoes in heaven. By the way, and I'm the one that's descended from Abraham through the male Y chromosome. By the way, the male Y chromosome, at least close to it. That's what I believe, anyways, probably. Because the J2 and the I2 apparently are from Abraham or Israel, even. And the J1 apparently is the Arabic population. And the I1, which is what I am, I think came from the J2. It's basically the same family tree, which is also the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons, Scandinavians. So I guess I'll take off too. Sal apparently is busy doing something. So God bless everybody. Stay close to God. Draw near to God. He will draw near to you. It's by His word that we're transformed, by His truth. We're convinced by the truth of God's word to do what's right.
Hey, what happened to everyone? Let me see. Is there anyone in the chat? So it's 4:29 a.m. I guess I'm the last man standing. So maybe what I'll do, I've been meaning to do this. I'm just going to practice a little bit. Oh, goodness. I can't share my screen. I was going to try to share my screen. I'm going to look up Shannon's theorem. Shannon's theorem. Actually, it's the famous paper is the theory of communication. So anyway, greetings everyone who's still around. And I'm trying to find where, let's see. There's still 11 people watching. Maybe they're just connected. So anyway, I have Shannon's theorem coming up because this is talked about a lot on this channel because people are framing some of the ideas in terms of information theory, which actually I've had some issue with, partly because there's so many definitions of information. So let me look here. Mathematical theory of communication. There was something that Leophilius said that kind of bothered me. He was saying Shannon is trying to reduce the Shannon entropy. I don't think that's correct. That's correct. So I'm looking at the paper right now, or I'm trying to look it up. So just give me a moment. I'm trying to get it here on YouTube. I mean, not YouTube, through Google. Man, it is really slow. So maybe the Wikipedia article will get it to me more efficiently. Oh, someone said, Sal, it's nice to see an Asian face. Well, thank you for the kind words. I was raised in the United States. I actually don't live in Asia. So there's a mathematical theory of communication. Mathematical theory of communication. Oh, there it is, entropy. Maybe I can get it from the Harvard website. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share. I'm not able to share my screen. So I just kind of have to try to talk about this. A lot of people keep talking about communication theory. I'm just like, guys, and they also talk about the second law of thermodynamics, and it kind of just, I'm just like, well, it'd be good to get, yeah, it would be good to go to the original papers. All right, there it is. We shall call H equals minus the summation of probability times log probability, the entropy of the set of probabilities. There it is. So in Shannon's theorem, it's not about reducing entropy. Entropy is actually, in Shannon's theory, is actually a good thing. And I just wanted to set the record straight. How this is all going to relate to something, I'm going to be talking about the problem of evil. And there's one aspect of Shannon's theorems that says it's better to let a mistake happen and then to correct it. It's a consequence of Shannon's theorem. And I found that very interesting because certain philosophers think that the ideal situation is you never have errors. And that can be actually refuted mathematically where there's situations, it's actually the ideal thing to do. And so that'll be a theme. I started a series on the problem of evil on my channel, the Evidence and Reasons channel. So while I have the platform here, and there are now only 9 people watching, guess I'm driving them away. Let me promote my website here. There are 2 of them. One of them got shut down, but then reinstated. That's the one that's one of the channels that I was talking about. Thankfully, that was my smaller channel, not my big one. But I'm going to post a link to my the first installment of my discussion on the problem of evil. So I'm going to type this in the chat. The problem of evil, first video on my channel. And here it is. And I'll be also talking, I might do something on the hiddenness of God. There might be a series there. Most of what I have done on my channel has been focused almost 100% the last few months on the creation evolution controversy. So it's been really heavy science, really nerdy stuff. And I felt I had to do that just to distinguish what my channel was about, that we would actually engage things at far deeper than anything superficial level. But now I think, there's a question here. Can we calculate God with mathematics theory? We cannot calculate God, but mathematics sometimes points to him, like so many things in the world. So I wouldn't say, no, we can't calculate God. The first problem with that is we would have to know that our math is correct. And the only way you really know your math is correct is you'd have to be God yourself. So that's what I think. That there's an element of having childlike faith to accept things for the simple fact that we aren't God. And but where mathematics came into play, at least in the question of the problem of evil, is it shows that there's some subtle things about what we may think is ideal or perfect. It's not quite so clean cut, and that shows up in the mathematics of music, and also in Shannon's theorem, and then computer language theory. Now that's very, very esoteric. My first talk on the problem of evil was very more from a gut level experience where people are just having all sorts of tragedies in their life. There's a family in my church where the mother is, she has 2 kids with very severe birth defects that they sadly inherited from their dad. Their dad died. Oh boy. Can't believe some people are here. The father had a very severe neurodegenerative disease. He died of it. The 2 kids are afflicted with it. 1 kid is not, thankfully. And so trying to comfort people who are in these situations, the verse that comes to mind is 2 Corinthians 4:17. This momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. And that was a great comfort to the Christians who knew of the power of God. They'd seen the miracles that, probably many of them seen the miracles that Paul worked and the other apostles. And yet they were suffering all sorts of afflictions like any human being, in addition to probably the persecution. So that verse is very comforting. It makes sense of the difficulty and pain that a Christian is suffering. God transforms it. Now, there's not really a good explanation for someone who's a non-believer. They may experience pain in this life, and when they die, they go from bad to worse. And that's something that I can't answer. How does pain and suffering do anything for them? So in part 1, I covered 2 Corinthians 4:17. In part 2, I'll probably be covering the Garden of Eden. Why would God create a paradise and then let a snake come in and tempt Eve? Many Christians say, well, God didn't create the world, man sinned. But the real question is, why did God let Adam and Eve even encounter Satan in the first place? It would have been so much better. And the answer is somewhat explained in Deuteronomy 13, where it said, the Lord God is testing you to see whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So there's some abusive stuff here, ubi, and You know, maybe it's time to just leave this chat. There have been people throughout history and even in the present day who've seen the miracles of God. It's hard to say to them that this is imaginary. Maybe it just seems that way to you, Ubi, because God hasn't revealed himself to you. Maybe you could care less. I don't know. But if you keep that attitude, maybe God. So just keep it to yourself and stop abusing people that may have had an encounter with God, may have found evidence. It's not, you are not God. You, Ubi, are not in a place to decide for other people what's true. You're just as human as anyone else, and you could be deeply mistaken. So all you're doing is just abusing people and just demeaning them. You don't know what their life experiences have been. You don't know maybe the life experiences of someone like Charles Duke, who was a astronaut, the youngest man to walk on the moon. He prayed for a little girl in the name of Jesus, and she got healed of her blindness.